Hello. How you guys doing today? I'm aggressively tired. I had like just a real bad night of sleep. Just didn't happen for me. It was one of those nights where like I went to bed and I laid in bed and I tried to get to sleep and then my brain was just like, "Did you know that in 1458?" I'm like, I don't. Well, if that's true, then wouldn't that mean that? I'm literally like sitting there being like, okay, just count sheep, John. Just like one, two, three. If a sheep and a cow were to have a baby, would it be a show or a keep? I would go with show, personally. But that's just because we already have a keep. Keep is already a word. Show is not a word. Show is a word. Show is not. Anyway, welcome to my show. I'm full of informative information. And of course, today I hung out with a friend, right? Friend came over. We went grocery shopping, which boy did I need groceries. I was dead out of food. She came on down, helped me out with that. When it snows like this, we just went through a big blizzard here in Toronto. And so everything was packed with snow and everything, hauling my wagon through snow. Thank God, though. Thank God. So no video today. Which, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? But outside of that, the thing that's really capturing my brain, and a big reason why I didn't really want to do a video, because I don't care to do a video about this, and honestly, I don't care to talk too much about this. But yesterday we talked about people were asking about Vosh, and I have kind of a I don't know if I would call it dismissive, but I don't really care that much about Vosh ultimately. People really care about this guy, and he keeps coming around. I keep getting asked about him, and people are sending me videos and be like, "Vosh said this. Can you believe Vosh?" The drama with Vosh and Dr. Flowers, or Vosh and Luna Oy, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just my critique of Vosh and all these guys is always going to be the same. Right? They're not that consequential, right? That it's just kind of intellectual masturbation what you're watching when you watch these guys, right? Because they're a dead end, right? They're not trying to galvanize the people. They're not trying to get people into the streets. They're not trying to activate people politically. They're not actually attempting to actively activate a working class consciousness or a class consciousness in the society. They're not attempting to empower people and drive people to the streets. They're not organizing movement. They're not organizing protests. They are just kind of like shock jocks. And this gets me thinking about well, there's going to be an inevitability, should I continue doing this, one hopes or one believes, that there'll be an inevitability where I'll be talking with some of these guys. Right? Vosh especially has people on his show all the time to quote-unquote debate, which is odd to me. The concept, everything I'm seeing happen in these platforms and on this thing it's all just about dunking on one another, right? It's about the antagonism. It's about finding the divides and splitting apart, right? And it just kind of, in my view, looks a bit childish, frankly. It just looks a bit childish, which I suppose is forgivable because the whole thing is so new, right? This method of communication, this medium that we're doing, right? This idea that a person can just put up live streams on a channel and have somebody interact with them through chat, or then connect in and you can have a conversation, right? It's all so very new. And so I guess it makes sense that it would take on something of a childish tone. And I was talking to my friend about this, and she was very helpful because she made me really realize, I'm not really interested in the debate, right? It's most explicitly articulated with Jackson Hinkle, right? The dive with Jackson Hinkle, he's just appeared on the stage. And all of his content is very, very much follows this formula of name verbs name, right? So like Chris Hedges schools Kyle Kalinske, so and so dunks on so and so, right? Like so and so smashes so and so, and so it ends up being like gossip television. Really, it's just gossip television for leftists. You won't believe what so and so said, right? And that's not really what I'm trying to do here. You know, like I'm trying to do something very grown up, right? I'm trying to actually galvanize a political movement, and yes, that comes with a great deal of social commentary. Yes, that comes with conversation. Yes, that comes with education. Yes, that comes with all of the same sort of similar stuff. But my hope is that we're creating a space that isn't simply intellectual masturbation, right? That is about galvanizing people, and that when I begin to interact with these other people, my hope is to do so as someone who goes into the conversation in order to find commonality. Like I always say, I'm not really a fundamentalist on most things, right? I'm interested in what the truth is. I'm interested on what the world is actually configured to be like, and our place in it, and how we operate in it. And I'm not like, I don't want to make content just to get clicks, just to get likes. And in many ways, I just look at these leftists and I just think to myself, like, oh, you care about your business. Like, that's what you're doing. Like, that's what these guys are doing, right? That they care about their business. And the movement is just kind of ancillary to that. The socialist movement, the leftist movement, is kind of just the vehicle by which they funnel their have found their niche in kind of the prevailing business model that is fundamentally selling yourself to the system of capital, right? And that's what we're doing here, right? Like if this channel is to be successful, it will be because I have effectively sold myself in the marketplace of ideas, right? I will have gained support from individuals, Patreons, and hopefully YouTube. And the attempt to make the movement actually move. I think that's really what it comes down to, right? The hope is to make the movement actually move. And the reality is that the movement doesn't actually move behind a computer screen. The movement doesn't actually move behind a keyboard. The movement doesn't move on the internet, right? That's where we can come and cry in our cups and talk to one another in solidarity, which I don't see that very often. I don't see that very often, that we're not really talking to one another in solidarity. And we can use the internet for that, but I don't see the next step, which is organized to get into the streets. Like, that's where the power actually is. That's where you're going to be really confronted. That's where the capitalists will really put it in you and put it on you, right? Like they don't care if you just stand behind the computer screen. Like, they really don't. Like, and you could become like the most anti-capitalist, communist, like far left radical, like screaming into the computer screen. But if that's where you're standing, like if that's what you do, then you're inert. You're a political dead end. And so I guess I'm also saying this just to remind myself, you know, like we're in the winter months now. And the winter months are very cold and dreary. Not a good time for organizing. A better time for planning, right? Better time for planning. And it's just to remind myself, I suppose, more than anything, that this isn't about that the channel is not an end in of itself, right? That it is just the platform to launch off into larger things. Good to see you too, Alex. I was talking about you just yesterday, bud, and this is a good opportunity. I don't have the link up in front of me right at the moment. But you are getting involved in your municipal politics, right? Like, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Encouraging other people, getting other people into positions where they are feeling like, well, I could run for my local municipal politics, or I could get involved with my local municipal council and get more involved in those sorts of ways, and actually seek to move the bar, right? Actually seek to push things. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Let me see if I can find you sent me, where did you put that, bud? Did you put that in the live stream, or did you put that in the... Dude, if you want to put that Facebook group up on the general, if you could do that for me, then I'll share it in the chat. Incidentally, right, here's the Discord. If you want to join in, we do all kinds of fun stuff, right? We got a video posted, an economic video that talks about the effect of colonial policies and impacts of today's country's economic outcomes. It's a summary of a much larger paper that goes into detail on the systemic issue. And I guess that's what I've been thinking about today. That's what I've been thinking about today, is just that I worry that the leftist movement, such that it exists here in North America, and this is like your Hassan, your Vosh, your Kyle Kalinske, your David Dole, they're essentially just television, right? Gossip media, right? Maybe a bit of social commentary and philosophy and all that kind of stuff, sure, but it's not too much different than just like old rich white men swirling their champagne or their scotch, you know, in a chair, kind of opining about the nature of reality. It's kind of harmless in a way, right? And so, nope. And as promised, bud, this is what Alex is up to, right? Alex, one of my Patreons, Municipal Socialist Alliance on Facebook. Share that in the... Yep, thank you very much. I appreciate that clarification, Mocked. Not encouraging illegal behavior, of course. Yep, the Unabomber got major journals and newspapers to publish his manifesto, but he had to get out there and pose a threat to capital by mailing a few bombs first. That's an unfortunate but actually quite accurate way of looking at it, bud. But you think about, let's use a less maybe controversial figure, or maybe a more controversial figure, depending on your position, Martin Luther King, right? If all Martin Luther King did was stand in the churches and make speeches, right? If all he did was make speeches, right? People actually would, like, the white culture probably would have lauded him, right? If that's all that Martin Luther King did, was stand behind the pulpit and talk about, you know, race relations and what it was, and write these books and all that kind of stuff, white culture probably would have been like, wow, okay, great. Like, here's a completely non-threatening person that we could listen to and perhaps even agree with and then do nothing about, right? And that's kind of fundamentally what I'm seeing these days, right? Oh, look, it's somebody I can agree and or disagree with and then do nothing about one way or the other. The reason why Martin Luther King had to be assassinated ultimately was because he was going into the streets. Because he wasn't just standing behind the pulpit. He wasn't just a preacher. He wasn't just attempting to move the culture or have debates or be philosophical. He was getting out from the behind the lectern, going outside of the church, and getting into the streets and bringing thousands of people with him. Right? In peaceful protest. And that's why they had to assassinate him. And that's why he was a threat. Hello, fellow victims of hierarchical realism. Hi, Grinning. How you doing, bud? How you doing, bud? And I guess I'm talking this way because I have been getting thinking, like, it's something of an inevitability that I am going to run into these guys, right? Like, as long as the channel keeps growing, as long as things keep going as it's going, like, it is something of an inevitability that eventually I'm going to run into someone like this, who's going to invite me on their show or something like this. And I don't know And I suppose the only thing that I could do is go into those conversations with the one criticism that I actually have for these people, which is you've got to get into the streets. That, like, many of these people have, like, hundreds of thousands of subscribers and followers, right? And they're not actually galvanizing them into the streets or doing anything that's actually impactful. But then also having these conversations with a spirit of solidarity is what I hope. That the reason why I think things get called drama often is because there is this kind of, like, angry dismissiveness that carries around with a lot of it. And anyway, the reality is as well, and I mean this is kind of harsh when it comes to someone like Vosh. I just don't find him particularly interesting, really, at the end of the day. Like, because he's politically inert and he doesn't actually do anything important, he's not really affecting anything, that kind of slides him into the category of just, like, entertainment television. And I don't particularly find him very entertaining or interesting. Like, if I want to learn something about, like, socialist countries or something, if I want to learn something about what's going on, I'll go learn it from the people who are doing it. Like, I just don't, like, he's like an in-between, and I'm just like, I don't really need him. And I don't particularly find his perspective to be that interesting. But obviously there are people who disagree with that, and more power to them. That's fine. I think the same about Jackson Hinkle. Hey, Robin, how you doing? How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. Hopefully things are going well for you, Robin. Like, Jackson Hinkle and the Dive seems like a straight-up guy. Seems like a cool guy, right? Honestly, seems like a nice guy. And but at the end of the day, it's like gossip television. Like, you listen to him and you're like, oh, this is like just fucking like gossip. You're just gossiping about gossip. And it's like, okay. Like, I'm here to talk about, like, Jordan Peterson, right? People who have kind of cultural interests. I'm here to talk about this kind of shit. Development of the ozone hole in the last year, which we'll get to. Talk about the Pride Toronto scandal, right? Like, real shit that's actually happening in the world. And I just find a lot of this gets very incestuous. And I understand that it's a bit that I'm a bit guilty of it myself at this moment, right? Here I am, joining in the incest, the intellectual masturbation fest. It's shall finished right now. Once again, I'll point out Alex organizing the Municipal Socialist Alliance. This group is for socialist groups participating in the municipal elections in the Greater Toronto Area under the banner of Municipal Socialist Alliance. This ambitious and worthwhile endeavor that's just getting off the ground. Alex trying to galvanize people, get people mobilized, create voting blocks. Create voting blocks. Start approaching these politicians and say, I have 500, I have 1,000 people in your riding who will vote for you if you X. Right? Yeah, I wish Hinkle had gone a more journalistic direction instead of just farming channel growth through online bubble interactions. Yeah, I mean, it's an inevitability that someone like him will show up. That's why I don't really, like, I'm not sitting here being like, these guys are done. Like, forget the rage thing. Like, that's kid shit. Like, it's an inevitability that someone like Hinkle will show up, right? And in fact, I actually think it indicates a strength of the movement. That someone is essentially just commenting on the movement itself. Like, that's it. So it's like, okay, there he is. He did it. I don't need to tune in. Yeah, Maupin is better for that, but he's literally a journalist. Yeah, well, and Maupin also gains a lot of credibility because he goes to the streets. Because he is taking to the streets, and he is attempting to be politically active, and and you can disagree with some of the stuff that he says, and you can disagree with who he is, and all, or his positions, I should say, and any of that. That's normal. But the truth is that Maupin shows up. And that makes him a far more interesting figure, and somebody worth paying attention to, in my view. Like, say what you like about, like, here's a great example in my own personal life, right? Say what you like about the Trotskyists, right? Those guys show up. That when there's a protest, when there's a climate change movement, when there's a poverty rally, when there's an issue where the people need to be galvanized and somebody needs to stand up and speak out against the injustices that are happening in the world, well, the Trotskyists show up. And you can kind of think it's sort of weird that they've kind of venerated this Trotsky guy as much as you want, but, like, they show up, so you better take them seriously. They're your allies, right? They're your allies. Probably the closest allies you have, right? And like, so why would I want to alienate those people? Why would I want to try to create a divide just to, like, score internet points, just to dunk on them, you know? And I feel that way about Maupin as well. Like, he shows up, he's doing the work, right? He's doing the work while these guys are commenting on the work. Here's a picture that comes from the Wall Street Journal. It's one of the great classics. Where did this come from? This is the Tax Policy Center. Here, down here it actually says. Anyway. Status, single parent, 2 children. $260,000. Right? And then it talks about, their federal taxes that she's experiencing. A single parent with 2 kids at $260,000? Retired couple, income $180,000. Married couple, 4 children, $650,000. Single person, $230,000. And this was published in the Wall Street Journal as, like, how these tax raises are affecting normal citizens. Everyday citizens are being affected. And, like, they're literally just showing you to your face how detached they are from reality, right? Like, the average income for a working American is something like $45,000, right? Where are they? Oh, they're just rendered invisible, right? Like, bear witness to how the cult reinforces itself, right? Just exclude people from the conversation completely. Do not include 90% of the society in the conversation. Be rid of it. And it's the same thing that I talk about, like, these modern day Christians, right? Like, it used to be that they would decontextualize quotes from the Bible, right? That used to be what they did, like 10, 15 years ago, right? Now they just don't even bother. Now they just don't even talk about it. Right? It's just they don't quote anything, they don't say anything, they don't do anything. They just ignore it. Like, that's what they're doing now. And it's very much the same. Like, here's all the people we care about. Literally the bottom 90% of the society, forget about it. Yeah, Wall Street Journal, right? It's the voice of the enemy. Worth paying attention to, though. Right? You should listen to what your enemies actually say. Right? Hey, Eric, how you doing? Speaking of non sequiturs, let's pick the number. I'm going with a 1.
Here we go for today's number.
And I'll clarify my position on this too, Alex.
January 20,
just for you.
2022. 10 balls.
10 balls.
Each ball has a number.
How did I pronounce that?
Numbers 1 through 10.
Ziffer? All right.
Swirl the numbers.
What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got a 60% chance.
Number.
Here we go. Pick a number. Oh, we got a good chance at this one. Everybody. Oh, he's really struggling. Oh, we got a real good chance at this one.
Today's number is...
Go thread it.
10.
I don't know why that one stung. So bad. Why did that one sting so bad? Oh, it did. It hit me. It just went like, oh, and I was just like, oh, like I felt it. It's not about, it's just about somebody picking it. And we had, what do we have? I picked 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We had a 70% chance, right? 70% chance of hitting it, and it just went right over us. Oh. No, it's not about high-low. It's literally just draw a random number. That's it. And then if you get the number, you get the David Lynch energy. And sometimes, and then I also play a song depending on what number gets drawn. But I broke a string the other day, and I haven't had the opportunity to go get any new strings, so I don't have a guitar. Like, literally, I broke the guitar string, and a blizzard happened. Just like, I'm a professional. I play songs on YouTube. Oh, it's 1 to 10. It's 1 to 10, yep. Yeah, just draw a ball, 1 to 10. We got and we had a 70% chance to do it. And what annoys me about that one is I thought to myself, I could pick a 10. And then I went, no, he drew a 10 yesterday. So I'll go the other direction and pick a 1. That's why it stung. It stung so bad. Because I was like, 10, no, 1. All right. Such is life. All right. Moving on. I gotta be honest, this is the thing I think I want to talk about the most today. Development of the ozone hole in the last year. Did you guys know that there's an ozone hole appearing over Antarctica? Did you know? Here's its development since July 2021. Right? Here it comes. Doesn't look like a Hellgate or anything, right? Doesn't look like something that someone's gonna shoot like a big laser through or something, right? There's like I'm picturing like Cloud from like an anime just like shooting a laser up from Antarctica. Right? And then it kind of goes away. Just goes away. But it's still there. So is it going to do this shit again? Why did this happen? How does this... Everything and anything all of the time. Like, this stresses me out so much. Like, it baffles me that people are still like just like going around being like, well, I better wake up at 6 a.m. to put on my pants and go work a job at a place I hate so that I can get enough money to pay rent in the building that I only really sleep in for. And it's just like, what? Like, I just feel like anyone who sees this should literally just like throw the table over and be like, no, like this planet is stupid. Like, this is dumb. And like, Planet Bezos is struggling. Yeah. Mass extinction pog champ. Yeah, the United States military is a rogue. Like, it is a rogue institution, right? It doesn't really respond to anything or anyone. Like, and they, very much like the Liberal Party of Canada, is like, oh yeah, climate change, don't worry about that. We've got that under control. Like, we're all about that. And they don't give a fuck. Like, they don't care. They only care that you care. They only care that you think that they care. Like, they don't actually care. And it's just like, what happens if Antarctica just starts to break apart and melt and shit? You know what? I want to get into like a fun little conspiracy space. I'm tired. I'm annoyed. I'm going to talk about some weird conspiracy stuff because I want to. Let's make today more a conspiracy. What do you guys think? Are you in? You in? You want to talk about some conspiracy shit? So, we all know about the Pangea effect, right? Like, we all know about the Pangea effect. And this is not conspiracy. This is real, right? You can see Africa was supposed to, like, connect right in over here, right? That this landmass was at one time a singular mass, right? That's sort of the prevailing theory about how the Earth was existent at one point, and that over time these land masses split apart. Well, there's a theory that part of the landmass, which was either here or here, right? I can't remember which, but so the idea is that there was actually a landmass that was connected in, that has floated down and is actually underneath the Arctic ice. And this landmass could very well be the fabled city of Atlantis, right? Right? This is some Graham Hancock, like, supernatural kind of idea-ing about how the Earth broke apart. And, like, I think all the time, like, what the heck is underneath this ice, man? If this ice melts, right, and sea levels rise and everything goes kind of haywire and everything's fucky, is it gonna, like, reveal the is there gonna be, like, a land underneath here? Like, what if the ice melts and underneath the ice is aliens? Hold on. Sorry. Aliens. Zealandia. Yeah, I just like, I don't really get why we're so fascinated with, like, Atlantis, like, and we've made all these films about, like, plunging the depths and finding, like, this advanced technology society. Graham thinks Atlantis is in Africa. From the evidence, I'd say he's correct. Good to see you, Dave. Good to see you. And I like Graham Hancock because he uses evidence. That's the thing. Not the David Icke stuff. Like the hollow moon. Do you guys know about this? Right? David Icke used to, like, walk around telling people that the moon is hollow. Like, wouldn't that be wild? Like, wouldn't that be absolutely bonkers if we finally get, like, people down there and they start mining the moon, and they're, like, mining the moon, and then suddenly they're like, wait a minute, this thing's hollow. I would just be like, no way, bro. No way. And, like, David Icke talks about how the moon is actually, like, an intergalactic space vessel, right? It's like a probe or something that, David Icke is like the master of cherry picking data. That's what he is, right? He's the master of cherry picking data and creating narratives using cherry picked data in order to facilitate, like, this larger thing. But when you, like, learn more about, like, let's say the moon, right? You get to be like, nah, brah, probably, like, normal moons, right? Don't forget the lizard people, John. Don't forget the lizard people. Although you do have guys like Noam Chomsky. Like, Noam Chomsky has said out loud, like, it is as if the American ruling class has been taken over by demons. Like, he has said that. And to be fair, he said it is as if, whereas David Icke would be like, the American ruling class has been taken over by demons. Right? And I'm like, and then there's a guy like me who's like, you know what? If it came out, like, this is how bad things have gotten from my perspective. If all of a sudden it came out that, like I don't know, Joe Biden is, like, doing one of his speeches or something, or he's up and he's in front of everybody. He's like, America's the greatest America that was ever in America. And then suddenly some kind of light hit him, or a ray, and his face, like, melted, and then he was like a lizard person underneath it. And he was like, oh, and we caught it on camera. It was like a huge deal. I'd be like, oh, okay. Like, I don't think it would freak me out at all. Like, I think I'm ready for it. Oh, open window. Can't open the window. I'm hot. Anyway. What even is the collective term for this pre-flood civilization community? I also kind of find the people who congregate around Graham Hancock to be kind of sus. Probably because of Joe Rogan. Yeah, Joe Rogan has Graham Hancock on. Graham Hancock is somewhat legitimized in my view because he does use evidence. Like he is rooting what he is saying in evidence, and for sure he jumps over into speculation territory. Like for sure he becomes like a speculative. Like there's a speculative jump at some point. Like he talks about drawings. He talks about the similarities in stories and drawing across cultures, like the fairies and like how close the fairies and the fae are to the current alien mythology and all this. And my bad. You're right. I did say that, didn't I, Alex? I would clarify my position on Trotskyists. I must say I'm intrigued. I am not like, I don't consider myself a Trotskyist because to be like a Trotskyist is a form of fundamentalism. So I don't call myself like a Stalinist or a Maoist or a Dengist or even a Leninist, really, because I think to do so kind of raises these figures up into a place where they can't possibly be. You know, like these people were in the end just people. They were just human beings walking around doing their best, trying to figure things out. But at the same time, I have to acknowledge that Trotsky was absolutely crucial in the revolution, absolutely crucial in the building of the Soviet Union, a strong and powerful individual. And I actually consider what happens between him and Stalin to be one of the great tragedies. One of the great tragedies of communism. That I do think that, like, as communism spreads and as it becomes a more prevalent and understood ideology, that gains more traction across, like, Africa, across the Middle East, even into Europe, people will look back at like this at Trotsky as one of the great tragic figures, because, like, if he and Stalin and the movements that sort of empowered both of them had been able to mend fences or been able to even live with one another, right? Let things cool down a little bit. I think the Soviet Union would have been stronger for it, right? Like Trotsky was obviously powerful and obviously passionate, and I really do think like he spent the rest of his life basically just shitting on Stalin. And I'm like, dude, if you had spent the rest of your life working with Stalin, trying to maintain your position within the Soviet Union as a leader, right? Maybe not the leader, but as a leader, I think that it would have been a stronger force in the world. Anyway, that's sort of my Trotsky position, and I love the Trotskyists, man, because they show up. They show up, and to me, that's number one. Like the rest of it's just conversation, right? The rest of it's just conversation. Adolf Hitler escaped Berlin on a submarine where he fled to Antarctica and now lives in the center of the hollowed-out Earth with aliens. Exactly, dude. That's exactly what happened, right? I love this narrative that Adolf Hitler like escaped. He escaped and he went down, like, the more sensible ones that don't involve aliens involve him escaping to, like, Argentina, right? So he escapes to Argentina and, like, lives out his days. And I'm just more or less like, who cares? Like, I don't, like, well, okay. You know? Like, he's certainly dead by now. And if he's not, then he's definitely, like, a couple of years out, right? Like it's... I also just don't think that it is in the interests of the capitalist class to keep this guy alive. It's extremely believable to me that like a group of Americans would storm the bunker. There's Hitler, right? Like it's extremely believable to me that the capitalists don't want Hitler to confess. They don't want him to go on trial. They don't want people to hear what Hitler has to say, right, at the Nuremberg trials and all this kind of stuff. I really do think the capitalists are just like, off this guy, man. Let's get rid of him. I've dabbled in programming. Sorry I missed your chat. Phone is in pocket. I'm a Sandersonian. Sandersonian. How's that? That actually kind of sounds kind of nice, actually. Sandersonian. Doesn't it rolls off the tongue in a way that I enjoy. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, Robin. I'm not gonna lie. Made me feel good about myself right there. Hey, Kate, how you doing? Good to see you, Kate. Jumping in here, guys. If you see this, what would be a realistic first step to a better government for USA or Canada? The realistic first step, Kate, get to know your neighbors, right? Talk to your neighbors. Create solidarity movements with one another. Involve yourself in municipal politics. Involve yourself in your local politics. That would be what I would consider to be the realistic first step to a better government for the United States or Canada. Like, forget about all the high-minded stuff. Forget about the, theory. Forget about any of that. Get to know your neighbors. Rebuild the communities. Rebuild the communities. That's going to be the first step, the first thing for all of us. That we do have to accept that in many ways, our communities have been dissolved. That a big reason why there's so much chaos and a big reason where things are so difficult is because we don't actually believe in one another anymore, and we don't believe in one another anymore because because our communities are dissolved, right? We don't really engage in community. We don't really have shared cultural moments or events any longer. But what policies? I mean, I make it as basic as it can get, right? Like, we are having a genuine conversation in this society, which I think is shocking. I think it's shocking that we are actually having a conversation about whether or not people should have food and shelter. Like, we aren't having a conversation about how do we get everybody food and shelter. We are having a conversation about whether or not people should have food and shelter. And to me, that's shocking. That's desperately shocking. And we have to actually call people out. We actually have to talk about that. I mean, are we at rock bottom yet? No, it gets worse than this. And it can always get worse than this. It can always get worse, right? World War II was a real event that occurred, right? Like, this is an important thing that we should remember. And I think a big reason why there's so much desperation or so much sense of hopelessness or despair in the populace is that we know we've got so much. Like, we've got so much. And it's going to, like, at this stage in the game, I think the millennials and Gen Z especially are just kind of looking around being like, can we just stabilize? Can we just keep this? Just keep this, right? Because the concern is that we're not going to keep it, that we are going to decline, right? And it doesn't necessarily need to be war, right? Like, take a look at what happened to Detroit, right? Everyone should have access to food and shelter. How do we help that? I mean, if you ask me, Kate, you just give people that, right? Hey, I don't have a house. Oh, well, here's an empty house that is owned by some guy who has 1,000 houses. Here's your house, right? I mean, we want access to food and shelter, or we want access to food. Oh, okay, so let's subsidize the grocery stores. Everybody just goes in. Just get your food, right? Like, I don't know that I'm actually a believer that strongly in something like a basic income, but I completely understand why people are about it. But because it is fundamentally just a subsidy for landlords and capitalists, I sort of go like, meh, take the means of production, take the housing, take the food, take all this stuff away from these guys. Transfer it into the hands of the working class. Like, that's my position. And I don't actually think that that's a very radical position. Like, I don't like it. It has become like a far lefty, crazy lefty, like, oh, you're a commie for sure kind of position. But I look at it and I go like, you have people without homes. You have people who are struggling to have food. Give them the house. Give them the food. So my concern with that is the power given to those governing with those morals. I mean, okay. Like, the truth is, Kate, it's like we are headed for a pretty major decline here. Like, and it is because the first of all, the culture, such that there is a culture, is very childish. We're a very childish culture. We don't actually believe in one another. We don't actually believe in ideas like civilization. We don't actually do any of that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, I see people with no empathy around me, with possibly no hope. Exactly, and this plays into exactly what I'm talking about, Kate. Like someone came into my chat fairly recently, and I've been talking about this ever since because I think it's important to reaffirm, right? That he was saying, hey, like Mao and Stalin and these guys, they did what they did through a violent revolution, right? They overthrew the illegitimate government through armed revolution, right? And I looked at him and I said, like, yeah, okay, but like the Russians were Russians, and perhaps they were having a conversation about who runs the place, but they all understood that they were all Russians, and they all understood that they should be on something of an equal footing. And there are discrepancies on that, especially in the case of Stalin, who fights against the kulaks, for example, right? And the Bataz, I believe, who were being oppressed. And in the case of Mao, right? They are fighting against, and these guys are fighting against monarchies, like literal like kingdoms, like kings, tsars, right? Like this kind of thing, emperors, and we have no, like, we don't have emperors and kings. We have a different kind of a structure, right? And so if you were to foment a violent revolution and actually seize, and if, let's say you were even successful in seizing the halls of power through a violent overthrow, right? It wouldn't work. And it wouldn't work because the divides that exist within our country are not understood to be as a ruling class against a working people, right? The bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. That the divides that exist within our culture are still very much on race lines, identity lines, national lines, state lines, right? That like places like Georgia and Atlanta and all these kinds of stuff, right, are not gonna like go along with California. Should it be a bunch of Californians that do what we're talking about, right? And because the society and the structure of the power structure was erected not to respond to the needs of the people, but it was erected to distribute power into a very small ruling class, right? That's what the structure was designed to do in America and Canada, right? Well, it can't actually sustain itself, and it doesn't respond to the populace because that's not what it was designed to do. And so when I say we are going into a period of decline, right? I'm dead serious about this. That the federal government of the United States of America is not going to keep the states together. That they will begin to balkanize. That the whole system and structure of the thing will stop working because the citizens are beginning to understand that this structure will never respond to us. It literally cannot. It even if the people who we put into the system were actually saying to one another, we need to respond to what the people are saying, it literally couldn't do it. That the only times that the system has ever responded to the will of the populace is when the halls of power were surrounded. That's the only time it has ever even responded to the needs of the people, which is why I espouse get into the streets. Who should be in charge of moral law? I mean, who is in charge of moral law? I mean, you're looking at a higher power for that. But it should be ultimately the people. The people should be the ones who are in charge of the laws that rule them, right? That's not how it is now. It's not the people who are in charge of the laws, right? The people participate in this kind of faux system that pretends as though it's going to respond to the will of the people, but that's not what it is. Yeah, I mean, and you can't, but, and what is the structure of that government? What is the structure of those laws? Will Canada balkanize? That is an interesting question, Major, because Canada is in a slightly different position, which is to say that Canada has shown that it is willing to concede to the demands of the populace more readily. Like, we have a universal healthcare system, for example, right? Like, our political class is willing to roll over and show its belly sooner, historically. And I think that it has something to do with Canada's small population, and also that the racial divides, while they still exist in Canada, are not as overwhelming. I think that it is a bit easier for Canadians to organize one another, or at least find consensus with one another. And once that consensus is found, it can manifest in the political system. It can manifest in the political system. It often doesn't. It's often diffused, but it can. And especially when it came to the issue of like the universal healthcare system, the difference, of course, between what happened with the universal healthcare system and what's happening now is that we don't have a Tommy Douglas, right? Like, the way the healthcare system gets passed here in Canada is that it's implemented in Saskatchewan first with the Premier Tommy Douglas. And then he takes to the federal politics and says, hey, we've done it. Like, that's not a pilot project. That's a successful implementation of a policy. And his whole shtick was just like, we should do this on the federal level. We've done it in the province. It works. Right? And people were going for it. And so the Liberals bowed to it. But we don't have that now. Like, there is no Tommy Douglas walking around right now. There's no premier that's implementing major policies or doing anything serious in that kind of regard. And who knows? Maybe they'll show up, right? That's possible, but I think it's far more likely that such a figure would be overwhelmed. Because, like, Tommy Douglas didn't have to face the overwhelming power. Like, there weren't literally people walking around with $100 billion in their pocket when Tommy Douglas was walking around, right? Like, the question really is, has the Canadian system truly been corrupted? Like, fully corrupted? Like, the American system was designed corrupted, right? It was designed to be, it wasn't even designed to be corrupted. It was designed to maintain corruption. Like, we want to make sure that everyone who gets into the halls of power are rich. That's what we want. Let's come into America. If you are going to be in the Congress, the Senate, or become the president, you're a rich person. You have a lot of money, right? That's the backbone of the whole thing. It's in the Constitution. To keep power within the wealth of the nation. James Madison wrote that, right? So it's designed to be that way. And that is a bit different from the Canadian Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and all that. So the question is, can the Canadian system actually respond rationally to the needs of the populace? Yet to be seen. I don't think so. I think that the overwhelming power of capital has actually decimated it. And that the people who are in the positions in order to kind of overthrow the apple cart, they're not actually doing it, right? I think the Constitution was solidified in efforts to retain freedom. Well, retain freedom for who? From who? Right? That, like, the founders were essentially monarchs, right? Like, they were kings and lords and ladies and like George Washington is a British general, right? Like, so when they're declaring their independence to get freedom, well, they're essentially just saying, we, the rich guys, the rich slave owners, just no longer want to pay taxes to the British crown, right? That's it. It was a bunch of lords and ladies just saying no thank you to the king. And initially they wanted to make Washington the king of America. And Washington said, no, thank you. And so they created this system based largely off of First Nations systems in order to maintain power within their strata, right? After escaping Great Britain's strict laws on freedom of religion, etc. Yeah, that's all part of it. Like, that's all, like, but make no mistake, like, economic power is at the heart of that document. And, like, it's no mistake that at the beginning of everything, it's white land-holding men who are the voters, right? Like, it's not a mistake. Like, they had to amend the Constitution in order to allow other peoples the right to vote, right? The document was designed to maintain power within the hands of the wealth-holding class. Like, that's what the document was designed to do. And it was, and sure, it created a great deal of freedom from the British Crown, but that freedom, like, if you were a serf working under Washington, right, or a worker, if you prefer, working under Washington, your life didn't change one iota. Your life under Washington was the same as it was under the British, right? The people who really saw a difference were the wealthy, because they got to keep their wealth. Every race has opposed others, especially in the more barbaric times. I mean, I do think Constitution's design was made in light of freedom for all. I mean, freedom for all, they literally owned slaves, Kate. Like, they literally owned people. They had people who they owned, and they had them. They owned them, right? Like, you would not have been able to vote when Ben Franklin was alive. Like, when was the last time Canada conceded to the demands of the populace? The universal healthcare system, like 50 years ago, right? But since then, not much, honestly. I'm not even sure how I will do that. I'm trying to recruit my friend and family and push for change and let them spread. Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. Which was totally wrong, but not unique to any other culture. I mean, find me the slaves in the Soviet Union. Find me the slaves in the communist Cuba, right? Like, this is a commonality amongst Westerners, that they assume that the events that occurred throughout Western society are universal, and they kind of aren't. And then you also get into this conversation that Grinning Guys is bringing up, which is define race, right? Like, it really used to, like, like the white race, right? And the black race is a very new invention, historically speaking. That it, like, there was a period of time where, like, the Irish, the Polish, the British, the French, like, these were all distinct cultural groups who fought with one another, right? And who had opinions of one another and had stereotypes and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes time for the ruling class to maintain power, well, they want the whites to get together in order to fight against the blacks. And it just, and it's silly. Like, it is actually silly to think about. That literally we're all walking around, you're all walking around being like, well, I have this pigmentation of skin. They have that pigmentation of skin. We are different. We should fight. It's dumb. Like, it's so fucking dumb. Like, it's so goddamn fucking stupid. It drives me crazy, actually. Ugh, it drives me fucking crazy. Well, I mean, like, the form of slavery that the United States and Britain reinstated, chattel slavery, was abolished for hundreds of years throughout Europe, right? That the transition from chattel slavery into serfdom was intentionally done, right? Because chattel slavery is a brutal system. Like, it's a brutal system. And serfdom is a step up from it, without a doubt. right? For sure. And you can find multiple cultures that were living, like, when people think of like medieval serfdom, they think it's as bad as chattel slavery. It's really not. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, Africa sold their own slaves for sure. Like, it's a slave system was erected, and for sure, like that economy existed in order to facilitate the war, and in many ways it's. But if you stop and think about it, in many ways it's very similar to how, like, the Norse are invading Britain. And so rather than letting the Norse come in and destroy everything, right? Instead of the Norse coming in and destroy everything, let's just give them a tithe. So that instead of them coming in, destroying everything and stealing our stuff, they just come in and steal our stuff. We gather our stuff for them and say, here you go, just take it. Because we don't want to get blown up, right? Like this, and there's a common thing that happens on the far right in the conversation, which is like, well, Africa was participating. It's like, I mean, Africa is pretty beholden, right? Like, they're heavily incentivized to participate at the end of a barrel of a gun. Like, thousands of years of slavery, I don't think is unique to the U.S. But like, I don't understand why this matters to you. Like, so. Like, it still exists. It's still a thing. They're still dealing with it. Like, and it's and we can do better. Have a good one, Alex. Still stuck on the native tribes doing the same thing to each other. Like, are you talking about First Nations tribes? Yeah, slavery never, and this is absolutely, it transformed, right? Hot take, capitalism ruined slavery. Yeah, slavery was going just fine until those capitalists came along and ruined it, right? They just totaled it. I mean, were the First Nation tribes doing the same thing to each other? There was a culture of ownership of I think it's unjustifiable to condemn the U.S. is what I mean. Well, I mean, we have to look at things as they are and as we understand they could be, right? Like, the United States is engaged and is still engaged in slave systems, right? Neoliberalism itself is a adaptation, right, to the idea that was an adaptation to the idea that, like, okay, well, we can't directly own slaves, so what we'll do is we'll create a market that the slaves will sell themselves to, right? So we won't own the slaves on a one-to-one. We'll actually just own the we'll just own the market that they have to sell themselves to, right? Which, I mean, Abraham Lincoln ran on a platform of abolishing that system. He wasn't successful because he had to fight a civil war with the South. But you're talking about, what is it, the 13th Amendment, the loophole, right? That if you imprison someone, you can still enslave them? Yeah. Good old Thomas Sowell, right? An absolute favorite. We all love Thomas Sowell. So happy that he's around. The difference between Western slavery and other forms of slavery is that the West was done based on race. Yeah. Also, slavery was already going out the door in the 19th century on the world stage, yet the U.S. tried to preserve it. Yeah. Well, I mean, current days, all races in the U.S. have equal rights. I mean, they're doing everything they can to stop that. And I mean, Kate, I got to be straight with you. Like, touch naive. Like, touch naive. Like, I don't want to be dismissive of you, honestly, but like what's going on throughout the South, throughout the states right now, like 22, like the United States has 20 to 25% of the world's prison population, right? Of that prison population, the vast majority of those people are black. right? The vast majority. And when you go in and you actually talk to some of these men and talk to Chris Hedges has done a really interesting conversation on this, right? Because Chris Hedges goes into prisons and actually teaches in the prisons. And you have black men who are there, right? Whose crimes are so insignificant that it's laughable. Like, and the sentences that they've got are absurd. And so what the American system has done is they have systematically criminalized, because they can't criminalize or make it wrong for a person to just be black. Well, then they criminalize all the activities surrounding black people. And then they put black communities into disadvantageous positions through a process called redlining, or excluding them from bills like the GI Bill, right? Which is done explicitly. So so you stand up and say that black people have equal rights. Well, and I turn around and say that's complete nonsense. Black people in America are facing hurdle after hurdle after hurdle after hurdle by an antagonistic force in their society. And that antagonistic force is incentivized to continue the project of slavery in America in order to get cheap labor to make their shit for them, right? It's the same system. It's the same idea, right? But instead of it just being, my name is John and I own slaves and they make my shit for me and they do what I say, right? Instead of that, it's my name is John and I own a prison where my police officers go and round up black people in the population and then they do what I say. So it's just like a couple extra steps, right? And like if you go and you read the book, I've got it right here. It's underneath my mic at the moment. Cotton is King. Or if you listen to Abraham Lincoln, right, they discuss this very openly. Like these things are very openly discussed. And so it's been a long time coming. Then wouldn't everyone employ the cheap labor, like with the wage gap? Yeah, they do. Of course. Yeah. Like, if you buy a product and it says made in America and it's not a gun, right? It's probably made by one of these prison slaves. Right? Like, that's probably how that's gone. There is only a veneer of freedom, democracy, and equal rights, yeah? Hey, no, how you doing, bud? I'm the death cult you are looking for. Oh, thank God. Hello, it's me you're looking for. I can see it in your eyes. So, you know it's bad when the Daily Beast is calling your bullshit out, right? New filings reveal another billionaire behind the big lie. Dick Uihlein has been a reliable GOP donor for years, but in 2020 he gave millions to groups associated with overturning the election. So you know how I've been saying on this channel how eventually these billionaires are just going to rule openly? Like they're not going to even bother mouthing the platitudes towards the democratic structure. They're not even going to bother like pretending as though the people even have a role to play in the democratic structure and the democratic system. Here we have literally the Daily Beast, which is like far right shit, right? This is like Ben Shapiro territory. Being like, yeah, in 2022, billionaires are giving money to overturn the United States election, right? Among the ranks of dark money groups and anonymous mega donors who bankrolled the efforts is a familiar name in GOP fundraising circles. Dick Uihlein, founder of the multinational Uline Shipping Company. According to tax disclosures first published online for the Center for Media and Democracy, Uihlin's nonprofit, the Ed Uihlein Family Foundation, poured millions of dollars in 2020 into a sprawling number of groups connected to efforts to challenge Joe Biden's victory and reimagine election law. as well as other right-wing extremist organizations, including ones designated as hate groups. And the money is pure Ulin. The foundation's $16.8 million in 2020 donations came exclusively from Dick Ulin himself. And over the course of the pivotal year, the organization gave it all away. Kyle Herrig, president of left-leaning watchdog group Accountable US, told the Daily Beast that money from Ulin and his wife Elizabeth has promoted hate and sedition. And this is just one of these guys. Right? This is just one of these guys. What's the concluding line, I wonder? I wonder if it is still the Daily Beast. I wonder if their conclusion is and that's why billionaires are good. The group's founder, Texas-based pastor Rick Scarborough, has a long history of bigoted anti-LGBTQ statements, such as considering suing the LGBTQ community for subjecting people to becoming AIDS sufferers. A single billionaire is dangerous. A single billionaire is dangerous. And you're seeing why, right? Because a single billionaire can raise enough power in order to challenge the existence of your governing systems in the first place, which eventually they will do, because it is within the interests of the billionaire class to eliminate their competitor. And in the marketplace of ideas, their competitor is the only institution which can strip their wealth away from them. And the only institution that can strip their wealth away from them is the democratic system. So if the people begin to actually get into the system and actually begin to pass legislation in order to tax these guys, they'll simply do away with it. Right? They'll simply just go, fuck off. What's going to happen to them? What are you going to do about that? Right? What are you going to do? If Gates, Musk, Bezos, this guy, Buffett all just get together and are just nah. Story's over, kids. Have a good one, Kate. Thank you for your honest questions. Wouldn't it be hilarious if Kate turned out to be the leader of a white supremacist group or something? Huh? Kate? Are you the leader of a white supremacist group, Kate? And you're coming in here trying to suss out the commies? Is that what's going on? You're coming in here and you're saying, this commie's in here, and I'm going to ask him some questions, try to undercut him, find out what he has to say, and then we'll go back and we'll have a discussion amongst me and my white supremacist friends, and then we're all going to crush him. That's what we're going to do. We're going to dox him and crush him. Kate's just like an undercover agent. I'm just fucking around, Kate. I'm just fucking around. Yeah, Alex Jones is the greatest impression, dude. I love the growly voice impressions. Yeah, I'm going to go off the rails for just a second. It's I've got a great Cookie Monster, right? C is for cookie, that's good enough for me. Oh, C is for cookie, and that's good enough for me. Oh, cookie starts with C. Yeah, Macho Man Randy Savage. Oh, yeah, brother, we're going to go down there and I'm going to show you the hand, right? And then Alex Jones is like that, but he's a little bit lower in the register, right? Oh, brother, we got to worry about what the CIA's doing out there, they're turning the frogs gay. I love the frogs gay thing, man. That was the best. Oh, that was the best. Sit every billionaire and politician down with a lie detector strapped to them, and we'll get to find out their real intents. You don't need to do that, no. We know their real intents. Their real intent is to just make as much money for themselves as possible. How do we know that? They're very upfront about it. The billionaire class is not lying about that, right? That's the thing that is so interesting about this particular conversation, is that the billionaires don't actually lie, right? They hire people to do that for them, right? The politicians are the liars. That's their job, right? They do that. But when you actually talk to the billionaires, they're more or less very open about this. They're just like, yes, of course, it's about making money for myself. Profit motive, right? Like when Bill Gates got Pfizer and Moderna and all these guys to not distribute vaccines to poorer countries, he was very explicit. He said, this is the time to make money. And if you give those vaccines away, you're not going to make money. Right? So we don't need to strap them down. We know what their intents are. Their intents are just to make money for themselves and externalize any barrier to that. So, like, if destroying this mountain is going to cause an economic devastation and lead to huge climate problems and all that, well, that's an externalization. That's external. That's over there, right? But the money we make's not external. That's real. Even though money itself is fake, doesn't really exist, and we could honestly do without it. What if Kate is Hillary? Holy fucking shit. It all makes sense now, Nova Scotia. Of course. Of course, Hillary Clinton's trying to get into the communist movement. She's trying to figure out what are these communists saying and all this kind of stuff. And then very steadily, like, she'll become like a communist, right? Everything she says will just be completely communist. And it'll be because Kate infiltrated our ranks. Came in at the bottom. Super male vitality overdose up in here. Oh man, I wish. I wish I was like jacked like Macho Man Randy Savage. Are you kidding me? I do okay. Like I'm okay. I feel like I'm like normal. Like I'm kind of average man. Macho Man though, he's oh yeah. Yeah. Love with that with the do-rag and all that. Fuck yeah. I miss Andre the Giant, you know, guys. I miss Andre the Giant. Like, I think that like 80% of the reason why it is offensive to me that anyone would even suggest that we remake The Princess Bride is because how dare you attempt to replace Andre the Giant? How dare you attempt to replace Andre the Giant in what is the seminal role of his career? Without a doubt. It is offensive to me that you would even believe that you think you could do it. That you even believe that you think you could find a person and slot them into that role and it would capture the whimsy and magic that Andre the Giant brought to that role simply by existing as he was. Right? Andre the Giant was just like a gift given to us by God itself or himself or Jesus Christ or Buddha or whatever. It just went sprinkle, 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 and out came Andre the Giant so that he could all stand in front of us and be like, does anybody want a peanut? And we were all like, yeah, yes, thank you so much, Andre. Oh, you're moving your finger. That's so wonderful. Oh my God, you're so perfect. He's so pure and beautiful and just such a like perfect encapsulation of what that character needed to be in that moment. I will accept a Princess Bride remake on one condition. It must be a Muppets Princess Bride. That's what it has to be. Absolutely. I'm not going to accept anything else. If they could do everything they could to try and make the best version of Princess Bride, and they will fail unless it's the Muppets. If it's the Muppets, then I'm like, yeah, you get Miss Piggy as Buttercup. You get Kermit is Wesley, right? Gonzo would be Inigo Montoya, right? And like really commit to the sword fights, like really commit to making something that looks really good and amazing, right? And just like tell the story the best way that you can, except it's just the Muppets. Yeah, there's something right about it. It's something right. It feels right. I don't know why. It just feels correct. I love it because I'm glancing down and Eziel's comment here, super male vitality overdose up in here. And I'm like talking about the Muppets doing a remake of Princess Bride. which I absolutely think would sell and would absolutely play, for sure. For sure. Okay. Sometimes I am stupid. Sometimes I am dumb. Thank you for listening. I'm so happy that you come. Yeah. So, Tim Hooper releases an investigation into Pride Toronto. $1,850,000 misdirection of funds and settler colonialism. Pride Toronto grants from Canadian Heritage. So what the story is, near as I understand it, is that Pride Toronto was commissioning Ken Monkman. And if you don't know who Ken Monkman is a famous Canadian artist, an Indigenous artist. This, I think, is his probably most famous work. And it deals with the residential school system. It deals with the kidnapping of children from the First Nations people by the Catholic Church and the RCMP. An issue that... Oh, I had it right here. Yep. An issue that, of course, organizations like the Federalists are still working to downplay and pretend like it didn't matter, right? Not one corpse has been found in the mass grave of Indigenous children in Canada. Like, if you're throwing shade on the residential school system issue, dude, like Daniel Davidson, that's a yikes from me, bro. And so Ken Monkman, right, seen here, was going to work with Pride Toronto, and they, in order to make 5 pieces of art, right, to show Indigenous life blending with the queer community, right? The idea of like Pride is about, freedom of sexuality, right? And freedom of the gay community, freedom of the queer community, all that kind of stuff. And the merger of that with Indigenous issues. And I think Ken Monkman would have been a really excellent person to have done such pieces. But then they presented him with a deal that said, so over a 5-year period, we will display these all throughout Pride Canada, going across Canada with these pieces. But then after that 5-year period, we own the art. And so we can use the art to continue making money for Pride. And Ken Monkman, of course, is like, no. Like, if I'm going to make these pieces, right, I am going to be invested in what happens to them, and I'm going to be part of that process. And so he leaves the project, right? So far, so no scandal, right? Pride asks Monkman, they put forward a deal. Monkman doesn't go along with it, so they part ways, right? Pride Toronto continues moving forward with another artist, while telling the city of Toronto that they had signed a deal with Ken Monkman. And in the signing of this deal, and it was because of this promise that they had signed this deal, that they got a whole bunch of money from the city. Only for the city now to find out, thanks to astute reporting from Tom Hooper, that Ken Monkman's not part of this. He's not involved in it. Right? And just like anything, the story goes deeper than that, but that's what I know so far. And it's just like, it's a weird story to me, because I'm like, why did this need to go down this way? Like, why did this need to go down this way? And near as I can tell, it had to go down that way because Pride Toronto is actually insolvent. Right? That's really the reality, is that they are, they're out of money, and so just like any capitalist institution, they're not going to go down without a fight. I hate interacting with police. They got a false alarm in the building I'm cleaning. Oh, yeah. That's tricky. Oh, yeah. Ken Monkman's great, dude. Like, if we could talk all day long about Ken Monkman. Like, he's a very powerful artist, right? He really uses... And what I like about his work is that it's like, his work is entrenched in realism, right? Like, it all looks very real, But every figure, when you actually pause and you look at the stuff, it's not realistic. Like the image of this is not actually very entrenched in realism. Like you've got these kids in the background, right? And they could be fleeing in the distance here, but they don't appear to be fleeing in fear, right? You've got this fellow who's just standing watching the crows and the birds around. So everything has, like, every image that he makes, it has a kind of symbolism to it. Everything's very symbolic, right? Like, for example, you've got the two RCMP officers here. The woman, of course, reaching out for her child. The child itself appears to be numbed, appears to just be numbed to this and is staring at us as if to say, like, why is this happening? What am I to do about this? Right? No, I love Ken Monkman's work. It's really, and every time I find a picture, like it's always very very strong, powerful stuff. Especially from, like, but especially for me, it is especially powerful because I'm from Manitoba. Like, you think about the 60s scoop, right? Really think about the fucking 60s scoop and how ridiculous, like, the 60s scoop happened at the same time that the Beatles were touring America, right? Like, Elvis Presley is still is like playing rock and roll while this is going on, you know? Like, to me, that's what I would like to see Ken Monkman's work used as, right? Like, set like a stage of like cultural events that are occurring, and then like have this shit happening at the same time, because that's what was going down all throughout Manitoba. And anybody who wants to tell me that, like, oh, they should get over it, or all these like, when I was growing up, people were very explicit in their racism towards the First Nations people. There was one guy, there was one First Nations fellow who they had been, put on the reserves, and they had been given a house, right? And these houses were built for these First Nations people, which, of course, the white population was like, well, we just gave them that? Well, what's this? It's like, yeah, we gave the kidnap victims houses, right? And then there was one First Nations fellow in particular who would actually blow holes in the side of the house, right? He literally would, like, take fucking dynamite and blow holes in the sides of the houses, right? And I say sides of the houses because then the government would give him another house. He would move into that house, and then he would blow holes in the side of it. And it kept happening over and over again. And at the time, everyone around me was like, oh, it's so wasteful, and why are we doing it? And why are we cooperating? This guy's just going to blow another hole in it all. And now that I've, like, grown up and I, like, know more about the 60s scoop and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, yeah, you're going to give him a house. He's going to blow a hole in the side of it. And you know what you're going to do about it? You're going to give him another house. And you know what he's going to do? You'll never believe it. He's going to blow a hole in the side of that house. And then you know what you're going to do about it? You're going to give him another house. And you know why? Because that's the cost that you have to pay for kidnapping him when he was a child and forcing him into a residential school system that attempted to cleanse his culture. If what you are complaining about is that every so often you have to pay a little money to get that guy a house, my response is sit down and shut up. Watch the man blow houses up. That is his art. That is a man dealing with trauma that your people inflicted on him. That's his art. Looking back on it, I wish I had taken pictures. Yeah, I wish I had taken pictures. I'm in good shit. It would have been cool to, like, film him doing it. Can you imagine? Like, just a guy blowing holes in the side of his house that he's living in. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think so, too. Like, it's a totally a genius way. Like, they're gonna give me a house every single time I blow it up. I'm gonna blow it up. Like, fuck these guys. Well, and also you got to think about it just from the element of, like, you're living in a house that's provided by the culture that kidnapped you, right? Like, it's got to be very, like, I can very much believe that this guy woke up in a house like this and would see it as a fucking prison and just see it as, like, another form of oppression and another tool and then want to destroy it. Like, it's fucked up. Like, it's super fucked up. And the people who downplay this shit, the people who are pretending like this stuff didn't matter, like this fucking Federalist article that pisses me off, which is like this snide, just like, not one corpse has been found in the mass grave of Indigenous children in Canada. Just a way to sort of like snidely sniff. And it's because they haven't broken ground on it. It's because they're not digging into it. Right? And there's reasons for that as well that they don't give a shit about. But like over and over again, the person who performed the ground-penetrating radar survey, a conflict anthropologist named Sarah Boulot, said at a news conference back in July that the probable grave sites could not be confirmed unless excavations were done. Right? And so because the excavations are not being done, right? They're not actually doing the excavations. Well, they haven't found it. And then it's like, there are indeed individual graves on the grounds of the Kamloops School, which still includes an actively used cemetery. Children who died at the school, there was actually one comment that gets made on this, which is whistleblower. Was it this article? Or in one of the articles that this article cites, they claim that there is no whistleblower. And it's like, there's for sure whistleblowers, dude. There were people going into this residential school system and coming out and saying, like, these places are like disease-ridden shitholes. Like, it's really, and it just pisses me off because, like, the only reason you would write this is to downplay this. Like, it's literally the only reason to do it is to pretend as though this wasn't a trauma-inducing tragedy inflicted on a group of people whose sin was not being white. Like, really. It's absolutely fucking brutal. 1984 critical race theory Che Guevara t-shirt. Fucking Dan Crenshaw. What a hack. Like, Crenshaw is unbelievable, man. I really, like... The biggest problem with Crenshaw is that he looks cool. Like, that's the problem with that guy, right? Like, but that's what sort of elevates him in the discourse, right? Like, he's not, for those who don't know, like, he's got the military backing, right? He's got all that kind of stuff, but he also has, like, a kind of, like he's got a pretty fucking cool vibe about him. But when you just look at him without the eye patch, right? When you just kind of look at him, he still has, like, a Russell Crowe sort of look about him, right? And he's got the patriotic backing. He's got all that kind of stuff. But, like, you listen to this guy talk, and he's like, ugh. Ugh. And this is, like, our brightest. This is, like, our best and our brightest. These are, like, our military personnel. These are the people who we send overseas. Guy loses an eye in war, and comes back and is still, like, a fucking American warrior, right? Anyway, yeah, I thought those mass graves were from Catholic orphanages. I mean, the mass graves are part of the residential school system, which I feel like it's a little, like, I think you're just using different words to describe the same thing. Like, the schools aren't technically orphanages. They are... Crenshaw needs to join the pirate party. Anyway. Army matey. Oh, are you ready, kids? Are you? I can't hear you. Anyway, Dan Crenshaw. Wah, 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 wah. Like, when I get to talking about people who are saying that not everybody should have food and shelter, you're talking about people like Dan Crenshaw, right? Like, everyone needs to have access to food and shelter, but there's always like a, oh, well, but, right? Everyone needs to have food and shelter, oh, well, under these circumstances. So there's like a means test that you've got to go through before you get access to food and shelter, according to men like Dan Crenshaw. Oh, you've got to be useful. Well, useful to who? Well, useful to the billionaire class that owns the labor market, right? Yeah, I hate interacting with police too. I heard shots at night, found out some shot up a house, 5 or 6 shots, no injuries, thankfully, yeah. Well, and those sorts of events are beginning to happen in Toronto as well. Like, we're hearing like, there are entire condo buildings that are essentially Airbnbs, right? And so there are people who live in these buildings, but there are like gunshots all the time because it's just like random people who live in these buildings, right? Or who Airbnb, so they just blow on in. And that is starting to, but you are starting to see Toronto's first ever mental health crisis response teams without police to launch in March. Trying to respond, I think, to the defund the police movement that exists, right? And honestly, one of the good ideas, and it is a good idea, like, not everything needs to be responded to with a dude with a gun on his hip, right? Like, not everything needs to be like, I have a gun, I'm here to shoot somebody, right? Like a guy like holding on to his gun and like, sir, I need you to, sir, can you, sir? Like, that most situations don't need to be responded that way, you know? Like, I am more or less of the opinion that, like, if you're concerned about the safety of your workers, right, going into these stressful situations, well, you should, it should be like the dynamic that Patrick Stewart has, or that Jean-Luc Picard has with Worf, right? Any situation they step into, Worf is like, photon torpedoes ready, Captain, right? Target locked, Captain. And Picard is like, hold on. Whoa. slow your roll. Let's let the situation play out a little, shall we? So the Community Crisis Support Service teams are the first of their kind in the province and will dispatch nurses and mental health support workers instead of police officers to respond to 911 calls about people in crisis. They were approved unanimously by City Council last February after growing protests against police brutality and the death of Regis Korchinski-Paquette, an Afro-Indigenous Toronto woman who died in police presence during a mental health crisis call in May 2020. Like, it is kind of one of these situations where it's like, if all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail, right? And so get people into these situations who are more interested in de-escalation, right? And I actually believe very strongly in de-escalation, and I believe very strongly that there are people who are good at it, right? My last boss, who I worked for at the toy store, he was a master of de-escalation. He knew exactly how to get a person to the end of the conversation and de-escalate things so that things are not going to move forward from here, right? He was masterful at it. And I saw him in some very serious situations, like with people who have mental illnesses. And I always believed of that guy, like, he should be one of these guys. Like, he should be one of these guys going into these situations and being like, hey, how's everybody doing? Like, okay, what's up? What's happening here? Can we get things figured out? Well, what do you think about that? Right? Like, he was a master of it, and I really admired that about him. And so I'm happy to see that they're even attempting this. I'm happy to see that the city of Toronto is even trying this. Right? Will this become widespread? Will this become a big thing? I don't know. Especially as the country assaults healthcare workers across the board, right? Especially as the country does everything it can to attempt to privatize the system. Like, so a system like this could be destined just for failure simply based on funding, right? Simply based on, like, yeah, we'll have one nurse, right? And that one nurse will respond to all the mental health crises that exist in the city. Oh, okay, bud. They're called transit-oriented communities, but to some GTA residents, they're a condo wasteland. Province spearheading new projects along York Region subway line to reduce sprawl. Yeah, we'll see about this, right? Like, some residents and municipal leaders are concerned. 2 large-scale developments in the Ontario government is planning along the Yonge North subway extension in Richmond Hill and Markham will bring too much density to the area. It's effectively going to be a condo wasteland. And like, I more or less look at these projects that are existing in Toronto as a way to transfer wealth away from the public into private power. Like, we actually have enough housing. Like, we actually do, right? Like, we have enough housing for everybody. And do we have enough housing for the foreseeable future? Well, we're going into a population decline, so you don't need to be a genius to figure this out. Although immigration is increasing, but in any case, right? We have enough housing. The reason why the housing market is losing its mind is not because we don't have enough housing, it's because the housing is not distributed equitably. And so what are the conservatives and the liberals doing? Right? They're saying to the populace, we need to build more housing. And the populace is going, yeah, I guess that makes sense. More housing, right? That should make it cheaper. But who is going to own this housing? Right? The rich. Right? And who is going to be paid for building this housing? The rich. So, and who is paying the bill? Not the rich. Right? So, near as I can tell, the provincial government is funding the building of private housing for billionaires. Like, that's all it is. Yeah, police around here are basically toll takers. I think the last shooting in the township was 5 years ago. I'm out at night, so they're always trolling for DUIs. Well, this is a point that I hear on... like, years ago, Joe Rogan would say this all the time. I don't know if he says it anymore, but he's like, well, what happens if there's no crime? Like, what happens to the cops if there's no crime? Well, the cops got to go out and make crime, right? Or because they just got to, like, they've got a quota to fill. And it's like, a quota? What the fuck are you even talking about with a quota? Right? Like, that blows me away. When I learned that police forces have quotas to fill, I was just like, excuse me? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? A quota to fill. It's totally fucking bullshit. Like, if there is a job that exists on the planet that should not have a quota, it's fucking police. Like, because what happens? Like, I know exactly what happens, because it happened in my small town all the time. There was literally a ticketing season, right? Literally. You would get to the end of the month, and the last week of the month, there was this stretch of highway that the cops would set up on, right? They would set up on this, and it was a bridge, right? So one cop would be positioned, so he was obscured. You couldn't see him. Right? And he'd have the radar, like the scanner, right? And he would scan every car that came by, and he would be on the radio, right? And he would scan the car, and then he would radio into his buddy who's on the other side of the bridge, right? So the car can't see it, can't see that behind the bridge there's 2, sometimes 3 police cars waiting to just pull out and pull him over and ticket him, right? And during that period of time, everybody in town knew when you go over that bridge, you go exactly the speed limit and no faster, right? You go exactly the speed limit and no faster. And of course, because of the way it was positioned, it's actually a section of the Trans-Canada Highway. So it was just on the outskirts of town, right? So who are they hitting? Not the townsfolk. Right? They're hitting people who are just traveling through, meeting that quota, right? And they call it performance metrics and accountability. Yeah, it's such fucking bullshit. Like, it's such fucking bullshit. And a waste of fucking time. Like, think about the waste of goddamn time that all is. Right? Like, you're wasting, like, 4 police officers' time. Right? You're wasting the time of the citizens. Right? You're wasting the money of the citizens, because essentially you're getting that money from the citizens in order to pay for the cops who are doing the job. Right? It's like a self-licking ice cream cone. Like, what's the point of this? This leads to socialism doesn't work because bureaucracy. The argument goes because these people have to meet quotas, they will be defunded, then it creates wasteful resources. And in this case with cops, excess of yeah. No, and it's dumb. Like, just the more you think about it, the dumber it gets. And it just does get dumber. Like, can't we not do that? Like, really? Like, can't we not do that? It seems so fucking stupid to me. And, like, but it turns out that, like, there's a lot of policing and a lot of police services that kind of fit this bill of just, like, what the fuck is this? Like, and so many kind of odd, like, incoherencies, like, strange things happen. Here's a personal one that I saw all the time, and I thought it was odd that I used to work in funeral services. My job was to go to houses, to go to crime scenes often, in order to pick up the body and bring it to the morgue or the hospital or wherever it was going to go. And and there was always, like, 2 cops on site waiting for me, right, to deal with the situation. And I always thought it was like, shouldn't there be a deeper integration on this, right? Like, why is that, like, literally man with gun on hip? And his job was straight up just stand around. Like, that was his whole job, right? And it's like, I feel like there could be an amalgamation here, right? Like, it could be straight up, like, oh, we've got we've got a body, right? Like, well, why is there, like, I don't know, why is there, like, this special... Anyway. Man, I think about that job. What a wild job that was. I kind of miss it, you know? There's a little part of me that's just like, man, I miss that job. Going on to scenes. Every scene was unique and different. You were talking with real people, you know? And I look back on it, and I was young when I was doing it, so I wasn't very well equipped to deal with the emotions of the populace. I think I would be a lot better at it now. And it always ran the gambit, man. It always ran the gambit from, like, weeping moms, or like a landlady. Sometimes you're picking up, like, a suicide out on the street somewhere. Sometimes you're just going into, like, a hospital. Sometimes you're just going into, like, an old folks home. But sometimes you go to, like, a crime scene. I remember one time in particular, I went into a crime scene, and the cops were asking us our opinion of what they thought was going on. Right? Because they're like, you guys see this a lot. And we're like, yeah. And we're walking around looking at it, and we're like, yeah, no forced entry, right? The guy probably knew the guy, right? It's just like, open the door and the guy gets capped. Anyway. That was interesting work, man. It was interesting work. It kind of made me want to pursue, like, policing and investigation, like, detective work. Like, I feel like that would be so fucking baller. And not in, like, the, like, noir kind of, like, detective work, right? She was a beautiful lady who walked in my door. My night was going well until she walked in. Like, forget all that. But just straight up in terms of, like, doing detective work and all this. But then you start to see how, like, corrupt the police services are, and who they actually work for. Kind of took the shine off of it, honestly. this is a serious question. Is China using Das Kapital as their economic policies? I know they use socialism with Chinese characteristics. I mean, it's the principles that Karl Marx wrote on how capitalist systems work and thus developing their infrastructure to incite the capitalism to come. Them paying low wages is actually part of their economic strategies, knowing full well that the capitalists will jump to it and thus create this ever-ending loop where they will develop their economy. I mean, yeah, they definitely use Das Kapital. Like, the Chinese are not fundamentalist when it comes to their economic systems, and they definitely use Das Kapital as a as a backbone for things, but they also acknowledge the somewhat experimental nature of all of this, and because they have such a huge population, like they have enormous density, they can afford to run like economic simulations, essentially, like they can afford to run economic policies in an area. And because of the density and the enormous amount of population that they have, when they run an economic idea in an area, it affects millions of people. Like you run an economic strategy in like a riding, what would be a riding here in Ontario, and that's going to affect like 10 million people, right? And so you get a pretty good idea about what works and what doesn't. So if you want to run an experiment, you can do so a little bit easier. And also the Chinese people, I think, are down for it. I think that's part of it, right? That they're not entrenched in an ideology of the ruling of a cult the way that we are, where we worship money and all this. And so somebody comes along and is like, hey, I have an idea about what we can do in this area, and people are kind of like, okay, let's see, right? Like a lot of these people have been like relocated from like rural villages and shit, right? And I have heard stories about how like the Chinese government will come into like a rural village that is largely dead, right? There's nothing going on. And they'll just like round those people up and then bring them into the city and drop them off and then tell them, okay, reorganize yourselves, right? And under those circumstances, there is an openness to explore experimental ideas. And it's difficult to want to stand in the way of a government that is doing that as they erect like a city around you. Like it's pretty difficult to want to get in the way of it or even complain. Is it really a civilized society if people aren't hassled by armed soldiers for practically nothing? Good question, Oddity. That's what I like you for, Oddity. You're asking the important questions, right? I know that if I walk around peacefully, not being harassed, I start to think like, man, what a shithole. Come on, where are the armed police? If I'm not seeing like an armed guard on the side of the street, do I really feel safe? Right? No, I only feel safe when I see a guy with my skin color holding a rifle. That's what makes me feel safe. Oh yeah, they're totally developing their economy on the expense of capital. Like that's what's brilliant about what China has done, right? Like when they opened up their markets to capitalist investment, right? It was done with a bit of like Mao grumbled about it. Mao wasn't actually happy about it. There was disagreements at the highest levels of the Communist Party about whether or not this should be done. But the reason why they move forward with it is because they fundamentally trusted one another and they understood that this was part of a plan. The famous line comes from Deng. Let some people get rich first, right? And the plan always was to get people into to get the money in, right, and then redistribute it. And because they actually have a cohesive system and they use a plan, right, they're essentially implementing that plan. Socialist China actually out-capitalism the United States. Well, I mean, sure. Like, sure. Look, capitalists play checkers, China plays chess. That's really what it is. Like, they're not really playing the same game. And that's pretty well articulated by the Chinese themselves, actually. Like, very recently I read on this channel that the Chinese, they say, like, we don't want this to be a boxing match. We want this to be more like track and field, where the only way to win is to improve oneself, right? And it's just like the Chinese are willing to do what it takes in order to improve their own country. Relocation was done during imperial times. That's definitely true, but the Chinese Communist Party has relocated populations for sure. Like that's not debatable. It's they're not the same kind of like forced relocations, if you understand me. Like during imperial times, like relocation's often done at the barrel of a gun, whereas like in like the Three Gorges Dam, like that's the best example I can think of that. Like the Three Gorges Dam required to do this required a relocation of millions of people. They relocated millions of people to build the Three Gorges Dam, but it wasn't like a fucking genocide or a travesty or any of this kind of shit, right? Like they knew that they were going to flood this area to build this dam. It's going to wipe these people out. They said to these people, better get out of here. They provided them housing, right? It's not like they just kicked them out and said, get fucked, right? They provided them housing. They provided them this kind of stuff. But for sure, China does relocation of its own population. It's just not like the people of China don't seem to be too angry about it, right? If anything, they look at it and they go like, oh, well, we're going to relocate to a different area. And that means we build this like glittering power plant that's going to power our country. Small sacrifice, right? Like the more I learn about China, the more I learn about China, the more I come to understand that the Chinese people do understand the concept of sacrifice, right? That it is actually okay to sacrifice something if it means that the collective moves forward in a stronger manner, right? And that this concept of self-sacrifice is something that we consider quite abhorrent in our culture, right? That's the beating heart of the anti-mask movement, right? That the anti-mask movement, which I consider to be starkly different from the anti-vax movement, right? The anti-vax movement is really tied up in a lot of like political and mistrust and a lot of anti-corporate, right? Anti-globalist, right? A lot of that kind of stuff. The anti-mask shit is selfishness. Just straight up just selfishness. Like literally you can help everyone around you. And even if you think it's bullshit, everyone around you will be grateful if all you do is put a piece of cloth over your face. And when you go into establishments. That's it. That's the long and short of it. And literally like 30% of the population just can't do it. They just won't do it. That's a culture that doesn't understand the concept of self-sacrifice and doesn't understand the power of self-sacrifice for your collective. And the irony of this is that one of the major themes in the Bible, the figure of Christ, one of the major themes of Christ is sacrifice. That he sacrifices himself for us, right? Jesus died for your sins, that sort of thing, right? And so when we see something like these relocations happen in China, we immediately jump for like authoritarian oppression and they're against their people. Oh my God, they're destroying them and all this kind of stuff. But when you actually like go to China and actually talk to the people who were relocated, they're like, yeah, I mean, maybe I didn't want to be relocated. Like maybe that wasn't the thing, but you know what? It's going to build this fucking power plant. It's going to make everything so much better. for all of China, right? And it's not like China abandoned me in the midst of this. It wasn't like they took me and dumped me onto the street, right? I got a house. I got forward momentum, right? So they looked out for me. They're looking out for China, and so I'm going to do the same, right? And I talk this way when it comes to, like, people will often come after me in regards to, like, oh well, like the sweatshops, John. What about the sweatshops? And it's like, again, like, not a great situation, obviously. Like, no one's pleased that there are sweatshops, least of all the Chinese people. But the reality of it is that these people are living in grinding poverty. And so they are going to war, right? They are sacrificing themselves to what they consider to be similar to a war effort, right? That the sacrifice they have to make now is not go to a battlefield and shoot guns and fight the way that we did against the imperialists, right? And the imperial army of China. Now it's about going into the factories and making this stuff for the world so that the wealth will transfer to China and we will become strong, right? The Made in China movement, there's a movement in China and like, they really venerate, like, we see these signs that say Made in China. Well, they're quite proud of that, right? Like, we look at it and we're just like, Made in China, you know, just like everything else. They're quite proud of that. Made in China is a very powerful statement to them because they understood the sacrifice that they had to put in. And they understood. And more importantly, that sacrifice paid out, right? They weren't abandoned for it. Like, that's the major difference. That here in North America, we would be told to sacrifice ourselves and put sacrifice forward in some regard, and then we would, and then we'd be abandoned, right? They would be like, well, thanks for your sacrifice, get fucked. You don't need to look any farther than the veterans to see that's the case, right? Yep, thanks for going overseas, fighting our war and losing your leg, get fucked. That's what they're telling these veterans. And if that's what they're going to do to the men who are getting shot at on behalf of the nation, to protect the nation, if you're fucking gullible, then they're going to do that to everybody. Like, we simply don't understand what it is to live in a society that actually has cohesion. Like, really. Like, we really don't understand what it is to live in a society. Like, every so often we do come together and create, like, a cohesive moment. The man lands on the moon, right? That's a moment of cohesion. That's a unifying moment, right? Passing a universal healthcare system. That's a moment of cohesion, right? That's a unifying moment. Like, they do exist, but if you don't have a culture that reinforces those and generates them and creates a culture of that, then those are just little fleeting flashes in the pan, done to placate a grumbling populace. I was explaining to someone why China had fences in these satellite images of middle schools, and they said, why didn't they just move Uyghurs somewhere else to avoid terrorism? Yeah, because they'd call forced deportations genocide as well. Well, also, that's kind of, like, that's not really fair, right? Like, it's not really fair to, like, people live here, right? They want to go to training schools and they want to go to stuff. So why would you put a school over here, right? Like, and in many cases, the people who are getting to these schools are traveling far, long distances. Like, these are poor people. Like, I don't. We here in North America are not connected to what poverty actually looks like and what it actually means. Like, you're telling me, okay, so let's say there's one of these vocational schools in Urumqi, right? Oh, okay, so a guy who is living in the Aku prefecture or the Kashgar prefecture, right? Maybe we're talking about people who, like, refugees who came in from Afghanistan, right? Or maybe we are talking about Uyghurs who live in the region, who live around here, all that kind of stuff. Okay, great. So, and they decide one day, you know what? I'm gonna try to get out of this. I'm gonna try to better myself, get some skills. Maybe I don't know Mandarin, right? Maybe I don't know these things, and I'm gonna go do it. Okay, so get from here to here, right? Just get from here to here. Well, okay, there's got to be a bus, right? Yeah, okay, sure, bud. I have $0. I don't own a bed. I literally live in like a hut. Like my whole life has been fleeing from or dealing with the impacts of war. Like, I don't have, like, buy a bus ticket. What are you fucking talking about? So they find themselves traveling, right? In order to get here, right? In order to get here. Look at the distance. Look at the scale of it. And now you're telling me that these people, oh, let's send them fucking over here, right? Let's send them over this way. Like, and dislocate them and relocate them when, oh, let's just fucking put the school, like, and fuck, put the school closer even. And I'm just like, these are not like concrete kind of things, but like, put a fence around it. I don't know. Fucking put a fence around it. What's the problem here? No, and Westerners just do not like to think about like what it is like to actually live in like a war zone, right? They just don't take this shit seriously, right? Because they don't care, really. They're just looking for a way to shit on it. Early in 2020, it was mostly Asian people who wore masks and people made fun of them for it. This anti-mask movement could be rooted in anti-Asian bigotry. Yeah, that's right, man. I do think you're onto something with that. Like, we don't want to become more like those Asian people, right? Like, oh no, a mask. They've worn masks for decades. If you feel sick, you wear a mask. Yeah. I don't know. It's just a good thing to do, right? The more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh shit, we should have been doing this all along, right? Like, I know for myself, and this is just like my own personal story. Since I've been wearing the mask, I haven't gotten sick, not once, right? And I'm sure there are other mitigating factors, like I go out less, like all of those kinds of things, but like it's pretty difficult for me not to conclude that the mask is playing some kind of role, right, in the fact that I'm not getting sick. I used to get sick once every 3 years, right? Or sorry, 3 times every year. Once every 3 years. That doesn't seem so bad. Once every, like 3 times a year. I would get sick 3 times a year. And it's like, now it's 0? Well, what, like, the mask's got to be doing something, right? It's got to be part of that somehow. Like, and I know that even if somebody stands up and says, crisis over, right? I'm still going to wear the mask. Like, when I go onto the transit, when I go into like a McDonald's or something, I'm going to put that mask on, right? Because, boy, howdy, is it nice not getting sick. I got to tell you. It's real nice not getting sick. You know? Like, the next time I get sick, I'm going to be really pissed off. I'm going to get sick, and I'm going to be like, are you kidding me? I thought it was over. I thought I was never going to get sick again. This is bullshit. That's exactly how I'm going to be. And then I'm going to go lie down and cry. Cry my little crying tears. I don't know, dude. Like, the Uyghur genocide story is so fucking annoying. Like, it's so fucking annoying. And it's getting to the point now, like, recently France, their lawmakers finally declared it a genocide, right? They finally got on side with the rest of the rest of North America, right? And it's like, and the irony of it is that the Western world keeps promulgating this narrative that says, oh, well, the reason why Muslim nations don't decry this genocide that's happening is because of trade relations. That these, which is a form of Islamic bigotry, saying that they are putting their economic demands, their greed, ahead of their religious position or their religious solidarity with other organizations, which is believable for xenophobic racists to promulgate, but the reality is it's the classic blame others for that which you are guilty, right? Why would France declare this to be so? Well, to make good, right? To make good, to mend fences, right? Like, France is a bit angry that Canada, the United States, and Australia left them out of this AUKUS deal. Which I'm like, why would you be angry about that? And so they're trying to mend fences. They're trying to be on the right side, or what they consider to be the right side of it. So literally, they're declaring that there's a genocide based on trade relations. And then turning around and accusing China, or not China in this case, but actual, like, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. Oh, they're only doing that to maintain economic ties to China. That's what's going on there. And the divide is really stark. Like, it really, really is like the global south versus like the colonizing powers. Like, that, it's really the divide on that issue. And so it's clearly a political issue. And there are plenty of examples. There was three institutions, in fact, in Italy that said, like, no, that's not a genocide, right? There's that the World Bank has said it isn't a genocide. Like, it's just like over and over and over and over again, like, the political apparatus of the West keep declaring it a genocide, but then institutions within those societies don't. And then everybody scratches their heads and wonders why, none of the Muslim nations are saying it's a genocide. Well, why do you think, dude? Probably because it's not. Like, how do you think the Uyghurs would feel if they started declaring this non-event a genocide? Like, and there's a reason why. I shouldn't say non-event. It actually is quite a serious event. But this is why Canada is Chinese citizens' least favorite country, according to state media survey. This actually breaks my heart. Like, it actually does. It makes me real sad. It makes me sad to think that there is a nation on the planet. And not like some, off on the side nation that no one's ever heard of. But, like, it makes me sad that China, a country that I think is brilliant and has a beautiful history, thinks this poorly of us, right? The poll conducted by the Global Times Research Center with a market survey firm Data 100 gathered 2,000 plus responses from 16 Chinese citizens. The survey showed Canada at the bottom of the ranking, with only 0.4% of respondents saying they liked the North American country. 0.4%. Like, 0.4%. That sucks. Like, that does suck. Like, and really is, like, a big reason why I keep pushing. And I keep trying to get the message out. And I keep trying to be heard on this issue of, like, we're going to get isolated. Like, we're going to get isolated. And it's completely our fault. Like, it's completely our fault. Like, China is saying that they don't like us. And the reasons for it are obvious, right? We're just like a grotesque lapdog of American power, just bowing our head and doing whatever we're told. And totally bullshitting everybody. Like, we're totally bullshitting everybody, right? I'm like, we're not even attempting to stand up and espouse anything remotely close to the truth. And we're allowing organizations that China has expelled from itself, like Falun Gong, to continue spreading throughout the society and spread its anti-Chinese propaganda throughout the country. And like literally like members of our political class are funding Falun Gong in order to do this through its paper, the Epoch Times. And like, I want China to like us. I think that we could have a good, stable relationship with China. I genuinely don't understand why we would want to be antagonistic to them. Right? And this is sad too, right? Canadians also seem to feel similarly about the Chinese. A survey by Research Co. and Glacier Media found that 68% of Canadians have an unfavorable opinion of China. And it just doesn't need to go down like this. Right? It just doesn't need to go down like this. That, like, I wish we were living in a country that wanted to build up other countries. That didn't see other countries as merely resource banks for us to exploit, but as groups of people, as civilizations and cultures that are striving to make themselves better, as we should strive to make ourselves better. And I really do worry that Canada's isolation on the world stage really, really mean that that we're going to be stuck with America as it starts to balkanize. And we're not looking to our own future, right? We're really just being very short-sighted about this. And I just think it would be nice if we actually started talking about China. Like, honestly, man, like, it's easy to do, too. This is the thing that's so fucking annoying about this, right? Like, you just put this shit on. It doesn't take a genius. It's not hard, right? Like, go and look at other people's culture and look at their country. There are people who are just walking around China, right? Do these people look like they're living in fear? Do these people look like they're oppressed? Do these people look as though they're suffering? Do these people look as though they're part of a totalitarian dictatorship that's oppressing them? Do they look as though they're suspicious of one another? Do they look as though things are going badly for them? Or do they look normal? Right? Like, they look fucking normal to me, don't they? Like, when I'm walking around here, with the exception of the architecture, right? With the exception of the architecture, for obvious reasons, looks pretty fucking normal to me, right? Like, this really isn't much different than, like, walking through, like, like Fort Garry, like one of these, like, towns that they, or one of these forts that they've maintained so that they can have people walk through them and, like, do historical reenactments or any of this kind of stuff. You know? Like, where's the threat? This is the thing I keep asking over and over again when it comes to China. Like, where's the threat? What am I supposed to be scared of exactly? Right? Like, what is it that I'm supposed to be, like, fearful of? And if anything, I really wish we'd just stop talking shit about them. and start just acknowledging that they are a people who are trying to organize themselves and live a peaceful and happy life, which looks to me like there's a degree of success at that, right? I wish I could escape this country, but I don't have family anywhere else or highly demanded skills or money. Yeah. Well, and I look at it like, somebody has asked me that. Well, why don't you just move to China? And my response is, I'm not going to abandon my homeland during its time of need. This is the moment when my country needs us the most. That I was born here, I was raised here. That by people who I care about and people who I love. And as we go through this time of crisis, I'm not going to abandon it based on its principles, its wrong-headed principles of individualism, right? I care about my people. I care about my country. I want to see it prosper. I want to see it do well. And so I won't abandon it in its time of need. Even if it starts to strike against me. Even if it strikes me down. I will be here to see that we can stabilize. And to hope that we can stabilize. And avoid the pitfalls that have befallen many civilizations in the past. And many societies in the past. And someone's got to witness the decline and report on it honestly. I'm sorry, John. I now have even more reasons for wanting to fuck off from this country once I finish college. In all my 20 years living here, I never considered myself Canadian. Now I know why. Well, Canada doesn't really exist as a nation yet. Not really. Like, we were erected as a colonial conquering power in order to exploit the resources of Canada on behalf of the people of Europe. That is really the legacy of Canada. Like, the Hudson's Bay Company came through and worked with the Canadian government, right? And it was all very much like Canada is a company. Like Canada is a business. It was erected as such. And when we declared our independence from the crown, from the British crown, well, we didn't really declare our independence from the business class, right? So we're still figuring out how to be a nation. We're still figuring out how to be a people. We're still figuring out how to be a civilization. Because we don't actually have a culture. We don't actually have a vested national unifying factor, right? And will we as a country survive the process of attempting to reclaim or build a civilization or build a country? Or will we balkanize and become independent nations who trade and work amongst one another independently, right? You take a look at a place like Quebec, and should that process begin to occur, Quebec would be ready to go. They already call themselves a nation within a nation, right? Which makes sense given their history. And they already, in recent memory, right, attempted to declare their independence from Canada. An attempt that failed marginally, like literally 49 to 51%, like very marginal. And that kind of thing can happen again. And these things do have a cascading effect. And as that happens, right, well, I'll be here. But there's a reason why it's difficult to kind of consider yourself Canadian, because it's like, well, what is it to be Canadian? What is that? Right? And right now, literally the response is dumb shit like hockey. Right? Like, really think about that. Like, really think about how low level your culture is. If you're walking around being like, yeah, hockey and beer. Like, Ooh, boy. Like, our cultural institutions are literally places like motherfucking Tim Hortons. Right? Like, our cultural institution, our major cultural institution is fucking Tim Hortons. Like, womp womp womp. They're being coerced into walking around looking at their phones, scratching their heads, and pretending to be normal. You see, it's all part of some big plot. That's right, Mocked. It's all just a plot. These are actors. They bring them in from Beijing, and they have them walk around, act all natural. And then the guy films it and he puts it up on YouTube to trick you into thinking that they're normal people, but they ain't normal. They're not normal like we're normal. They aren't good, God-fearing American people. Yeah, like, yikes. And there are for sure people out there who think that way too. That's what's wild, dude. It's not like that's not a big jump. Like, imagine the scale of that conspiracy. But that is very much how. What, do you want to come up with your thing? I don't think you can come up with your thing, dude. I'm talking to Milo, by the way, guys. Sorry. What, you want to come up? What? Oh, you want to? He just wants me to play with him a little bit. Little cute pie. What is the main difference between communism and capitalism? Kate, always asking key questions. So, I'm going to do this very briefly, Kate, because I could talk very at length on that. Capitalism is defined between the relationship between the ownership class, the bourgeoisie, and the working class. These two classes fight against one another in antagonistic ways, naturally, built into the system structurally. The capitalist, the owners, want workers to work for them for nothing and want to take the benefits of that work for themselves, exclusively. The workers would rather their own work be used for themselves and gain from their own work, right? So this is the exploitive model that capitalism brings to the table, and the defining characteristic of capitalism, the relationship between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. So the main difference between communism and capitalism is that communism seeks to eliminate the bourgeoisie class, eliminate the ownership class, and have one class exist in the society, which is the working class. That there is no such thing as a bourgeoisie at all. Which is why the communist countries want to erect a what they call a dictatorship of the proletariat. Which the idea behind the dictatorship of the proletariat is that the ownership class, the bourgeoisie class, the reactionary right, is chased out of the conversation completely. Right? That they're just eliminated from the government discourse, and that any communication that exists between the government and those ownership capitalist forces is considered corruption. So capitalism is exploitation, yeah. And how do we attain this? Great question. The channel Re-Education have a few videos on propaganda, and they're absolutely mind-blowing. In one of them, he demonstrates how simply music in a video changes our perception of the video. Yeah. Well, here's a great example of propaganda in action, if you ask me, and it speaks very much to the mindset of people. We have done... everybody hates laugh tracks, right? You watch a movie or a television show that has a laugh track, and literally everybody goes, "Buh, laugh track. What a janky, lame sort of thing. Laugh track." But the tests that we've done have shown that television shows that have laugh tracks elicit more enjoyment from the viewer. We like the laugh track. We like laughing along. The laugh track inspires laughter from us. We enjoy what we're watching more, right? And all indicators show that that's the case. And then if you take the laugh track away and show it to another group of people, they react less and they actually like the show less, right? And everyone will tell you, oh, the laugh track, get rid of the laugh track. The laugh track sucks. But we like the laugh track. We react to the laugh track, right? And so that builds something intrinsic inside of us that even though we know we don't like it, we still respond to it naturally, right? It still inspires an emotional response from us. And what that shows you is that even in the face of dislike, even when you are not in favor of something, you can still be influenced emotionally. Because we're not actually intellectual creatures first and foremost. We are emotional creatures first and foremost. Like, who need to respond to the material needs of what it is to be a human being. So yeah, propaganda is wild, man. And I think about all the time, like, we banned a plant while smoking another plant. Literally smoking cigarettes, marijuana's gotta go. Like, wow. ONDP is finally above PCs since May. Did you cover that yet? Also, China walks away. Thanks, Vince. No! Is the ONDP above? ONDP polling above PCs. This is all I've seen. Get me to search something else, Vince, to find this. Because I would like to report on that. But all I've seen recently, like 2 days ago, a 9-point lead. Yeah, if you can correct me on that, I'll gladly be corrected. If you're in the Discord, feel free to put it in the Discord. Most of what we know as Canadian culture is a marketing campaign designed by the resource extraction conglomerates that own all the land. Yep, that's a good way of putting it. Capitalism is profit over people. Communism is people over profit. Absolutely. Let's get back to the walk. Dude, I love this. I gotta put this shit up all the time. I love this shit. Just like walking around in China. Isn't it nice? Look at how cool their foliage looks. Right? Like, their trees are so beautiful. Like, their trees look different than our trees do, but they're really interesting. I have a friend who absolutely will be like, oh yeah, that's a Chinese willow, or like that kind of thing. And then like the signage and everything, it's so beautiful. How could you be scared of this? Anyway. He demonstrates that even as an amateur, you can dramatically change mood of the video, and then when you have professional crew from the CBC report on Uyghur stuff, yet they deliberately make it look terrible, and then they use the same kind of situation in a different country, has the opposite message. Exactly. Like, use a grayscale screen, or like a yellow screen, right? Dim the lights. I remember I did a breakdown of the BBC when they sent a film crew in to one of these schools, right? And the whole time I was commenting on, like, listen to them, like, put the music track on this. They're just going like, boo. There's always this, like, and you're like, okay, what do you think's gonna happen, right? Right? The absolute worst thing that they did in that BBC article was, or in that BBC thing, is that they said, we found some graffiti that said, "Be still my heart. We didn't show it here for fear of the student." And it's like the assumption that what you're seeing is a genocide. And like I literally said at the time, I was like, there is a lot of reasons why a person would write, "Be still my heart," right? Like, maybe they just went through a breakup. Maybe they just lost a family member. Maybe they traveled 50 miles and left everything they knew behind and now are lonely, right? There's a lot of reasons why a person would write something like this. But yeah, 100%, it's because there's a genocide going on, for sure. Capitalism is a class society in which individuals own the workplace. Communism is a classless society in which the workers own the workplace. Yeah. Is either more corruptible than the other? Mob mentality? I mean, power is corruptible, like, for sure. And it's something that the Chinese are struggling with, you can tell. They're struggling with how do we ensure that our governing system doesn't get corrupted. And they're acutely aware of what occurred in the Soviet Union. That once Stalin died, the governing system of the Soviet Union becomes corrupted. and eventually falls to Western capitalism, right? Falls to neoliberal capitalism, and so the Chinese Communist Party is acutely aware of this and is really looking at, okay, how do we avoid this? How do we avoid that kind of corruption? And Xi Jinping himself was elected on a platform of rooting out corruption, which he seems very dedicated to. Like, even going after people within his own faction, even going after people who are his own, like, in his own inner circle, right? Like, he's very serious about it. And unlike the Soviet Union, the Chinese government is more interested in vetting. There's a vetting process, right? You don't just get elected as the leader of the country because you're popular, right? It's not just a popularity thing, right? You get elected to go to the National People's Congress on a popularity level, right? So if you win the popularity contest within your riding or within your little your community, you get sent to the National People's Congress. But once you're at the National People's Congress, there's like a steady advancement, and they train you. They literally like send you places, and they're like, okay, you're going to govern these 10,000 people for a year, right? So, and they are teaching people how to be governors, and there are assessments, and there's back and forth. And I think the hope that the Chinese Communist Party has is that by creating an institution that is simultaneously educating its own governors in what governance is and what it should be, while simultaneously establishing a stability in this method of ascension, that they're hoping that it will be far more difficult to corrupt. Only time can tell if that's going to be the case, but you have to admire the attempt. You really do have to admire the attempt. And are we in the midst of a long-standing, millennia-long Chinese Communist Party, or are we amidst sort of a false image of that? I think that applying the same censorship to America might lead to a bad case. I mean, yeah, like, what's going on in America is absolute division. Like, it is every man for themselves at this point. Like, the prevailing ideology of the capitalist death cult has been the free market will decide, right? Let the free market decide. Deregulate capitalism. Let the free market decide. Cut the red tape. The government is the problem, right? That's been what we've been told for the last 40 years. That's not any different than saying, let chaos reign, right? Let the free market decide. Let chaos reign, right? Well, chaos is reigning. And so this is why the United States is so bad at responding to collective crises. Because at the end of the day, the United States is not unified. And it's not a collective people. And they don't view things collectively. And they don't make collective decisions together. They don't actually... And even worse than that, when collective decisions are made... Right? When collective decisions are made, there's still a large segment of the society that will dissent from those collective decisions. Right? So it's very difficult to organize a community and a culture on these lines. Right? Because they're not actually interested in it. Who do you want to rule? Do you want a small number of people controlling everything, or do you want the ability to choose every aspect of your life without a dictator? Oh, new Angus Reid poll. Probably could just find it with Angus Reid, right? Angus Reid, Ontario polling. There's a new Angus Reid poll? Let's go. Here you go. Here you go. Let's go, Brandon. Here's a poll that I like, and this is coming from Angus Reid. Like, I trust Angus Reid. I do. I think I can finally get to a point where I can actually say it out loud and not experience much blowback. If Angus Reid is polling it and it's coming out that way, these guys are pretty accurate. Like, sure, that there's a margin of error, but they tell you what the margin of error is, and so if it falls within the margin of error, it's like, yeah, we told you about the margin of error. I'm fairly impressed with how Angus Reid polls, and if this is what they're polling, guys. Okay. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. Honestly, I don't know what to make of this because I just don't believe it. I just said that I trust Angus Reid, and now I'm saying I don't believe it because, like, Canadians keep fucking doing this bullshit where they're like, well, I don't like these conservatives, so I'm going to vote Liberal. Oh, these Liberal, I'm going to vote Conservative. I don't like this other. But it does, and here in Ontario, there was always like the Ray days, right? Like the Bob Ray days where they're being overwhelmed by and so the NDP could never get any traction because you could just fearmonger about the Bob Ray days. Even though when you look at the Bob Ray days, you're like, this seems fine. So it's all just normal fucking bullshit propaganda. And I mean, my analysis of this would be like, yeah, we know that Doug Ford is declining in the polls. Like, we know that he's not doing well in the first place, and that's staying true. The shocker is that here's where the NDP are, and here's where the Liberal are, right? I was expecting an inversion of this. That was my expectation. And so if the NDP are actually up here, and this is how people are viewing the NDP, it really does look like Ontario is ready to give a third party a chance, right? They're ready to throw their chips in to break apart the Conservative-Liberal alliance, right? To at least break from the norm, right? At least attempt to break the cycle, the trauma cycle, right? Okay. I gotta tell you, I have shit on Andrea Horvath this whole time. Like I've called her a substitute kindergarten teacher. I've called her weak. I think she's done things that are weak. But I will also say this about her, right? She has been the leader of the NDP for 16, 20 years now. She has been building a political party, recovering from the Bob Ray days, and now's her time. And I gotta tell you straight up, that if she wins, just on a straight up like storytelling side of it, just straight up the storytelling side of a woman who has been fighting against this system her whole life, and is ascending up and is punching, and finally, right when it mattered, she grabs it. It's got that same kind of energy every single time I watch a sports movie, like a sports movie of any sort. Anytime I watch a sports movie, like it doesn't matter, baseball, football, like teams being teams, or Remember the Titans, any of this shit, even something like Happy Gilmore, right? Like, you know that scene, it's at the end of every sports movie you've ever seen, right? Where it all comes down to this moment, right? You got to throw the ball, you got to hit the ball, you got to chip the thing, you got to hit the thing, you got to do that. And there's always the moment where he's like, and the guy's running. And then the ball comes and he catches it. He lands. The crowd roars. They score the touchdown. Everybody loses their mind. The music swells. And every single time that shit happens, I just go, they worked so hard. They worked so hard and they did it. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Kids, they actually put it together and they did it. Oh! It's me every single time, even though I know it's going to happen. And it's even in stuff like Seabiscuit, like the horse right, right? Every fucking time. And I know, and I even know that I'm gonna like well up. I even know it. And it's still like, I'm watching it and it's happening and I feel it. It's like, it happens like right from my gut and it comes right up. And I'm like, fuck, really? Like, this is a swimming movie. Really? Ugh. Like, and that's exactly how I feel about an Andrea Horvath win. That if she ascends and she's worked and she actually like gets it and she reaches up and it's just going to be like, and the winner of the contest is Andrea Horvath. And I'm just going to like, she works so hard. Oh, she worked so hard, Andrea. Oh, that's exactly the story for Andrea Horvath. So I'm rooting for her. I am rooting for her. I wish that she was bolder. I wish that she was saying more. I wish that she was pushing back harder. But I hope she wins. If only for the narrative. If only so that we can say, hey, conservatives and liberals, we will do this to you. Get fucked. Right? Like, if Andrea Horvath actually won, think about how scary that is on the federal stage for someone like Justin Trudeau. Oh, Ontario just went NDP. And then here's Jagmeet Singh being like, hey, I poll pretty well, eh? No, see how this polling is actually doing pretty well? So, I'm rooting for her. Yeah, let's hope it's not an outlier. Angus Reid is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with Angus Reid. And don't be too surprised if now that this Angus Reid poll has come out that there's going to be a series of polls that affirm this. That there are polling agencies that skew more to the right. But the reality is, like when I say skew more to the right, we're talking like percentages here. Because it's very difficult to be biased in your polling data. Because if you discredit yourself, like if you poll incorrectly, if you're wrong, right? If you're wrong and you're consistently wrong, well, people just stop paying attention to you, right? You're staking your claim on basically being able to say, called it. That's your whole claim. If you are a polling agency, your whole claim is, called it, did it. Yep, we said it was going to happen, and it happened, right? So if you're not doing that, then you're out of the game. I thought communism was more on the side of a small group of people in charge. No. Like, the whole idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat is that it's the people themselves that govern, right? And so take a look at... let's get real explicit, Kate. I love this. This is great. National People's Congress. You can go to the Wikipedia page. I highly suggest you do, right? And you can read up on the structure of the Chinese government, right? And here's the seats, the seat structure. Each one of these seats is elected, right? That China is broken up into a series of into a series of, what do they call them? And of course, if you go to the Wikipedia page, you're going to get fun little things. The NPC is an authoritarian legislature. It has alternatively been characterized as a rubber stamp for the Chinese regime. Like, think about how fucking stupid that sounds. It sounds so stupid to say that shit out loud. The NPC is an authoritarian legislature. Like, when they say authoritarian, they mean it passes laws that people follow. Unlike the American system where they pass laws that nobody follows. It has alternatively been characterized as a rubber stamp for the Chinese regime. Like, that's so fucking stupid. Like, what it actually is. So, in each, what do they call it? It's the largest parliamentary body in the world, right? Meets in full session for roughly 2 weeks each year, votes on important pieces of legislation, personnel assignments, amongst other things, right? Like, that's accurate. The NPC is elected for a term of 5 years. It holds annual sessions every spring, usually lasts from 10 to 14 days, in the Great Hall of the People on the west side of Tiananmen Square in Beijing. The NPC sessions are usually timed to occur with the meetings of the National Committee of the People's Political Consultative Conference, right? Which makes sense. A consultative body whose members represent various social groups. And you can get into the history of it, how it was erected. But it's, the nuts and bolts of it is that each one of these seats is a representative, is a elected representative of a region in China, right? You can see how there's the alternative colors, right? The alternative colors are different parties, right? And the gray here are independents. So much for like this like evil dictatorship that's dominating authoritarian, like blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. This is elected, right? From this group of elected people, so these group of elected people go through the system of training that I was discussing before. And these people then in turn, these are the people who are responsible for voting for stuff like the NPC political what's the name of this? Shit, I'm totally blanking on the name of this. There's the NPC, and then there's smaller structures that are more important, that are more agile, right? But these people are also elected, and as you can see, they're also from multi-parties, right? Dominated right now by the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party. And then also, it's this organization that's also responsible for electing the president. So Xi Jinping is actually elected from this organization, right? So it's a democratic system. You can read up about it, right? Here it is, right? And the Wikipedia article is going to have bullshit in it, like, is an authoritarian legislator, got a rubber stamp for the Chinese regime, which is unbelievable bullshit. Like, unbelievable bullshit. Like, this paragraph right here, just lift that right out. But, But in terms of the information, pretty accurate. Okay, buddy, you want to come up? Okay, buddy. You just want pets. And like, again, like, so you do have like 175 people who are who are like in the upper kind of echelon sort of thing. But again, these people are elected by these people, right? So the process is democratic. It's not our democratic system, but it's a democratic system nonetheless. And it also pays to remember that it's a democratic system that is enjoying up to 90% support within the populace, right? Like, and that's coming from Harvard. Harvard ran a poll, a 20-year poll, no less. It was like 17 years. They ran an enormous poll, and not only did they find that there was mass support for the government, but that as the polling continued year over year, the support improved. That people became more supportive of the government over time. So it's like, it looks as though the Chinese have built an institution that attempts to, A, respond to the needs of the people, and then B, stabilize itself. Will they be successful? Only time can tell. Only time can tell. But part of what makes it difficult to pierce through and see if it is stable or not is that this internal group right here is very difficult to penetrate. You can't get spies into it. So we don't really know what's happening at this level. And that's on purpose, for obvious reasons. I put a quick 4-minute video on the live stream channel, hilarious and entertaining, on how the BBC does anti-Chinese. Oh yeah, I think I might know the video you're talking about, dude.
Oh, welcome back to
I love
another
this
video.
guy.
If you're new to the channel, then my name is Jason. We're back again. We're in Guizhou province, obviously, because that's where I live. Guizhou province, one of the poorest provinces in all of China. UK media. Here we are at one of China's toxic rivers. If you look at the color of the water, you may see that it looks quite beautiful, but actually it was dyed to look this way. I just spoke to a woman over there in the background, and she told me that she added 100 liters of dye to to the water, and she's also spraying the leaves green so it looks more beautiful. Ah, gymnasium. Look at the top of these steps. Whoa. That is a pretty nice stadium. There's someone on the pitch. UK media. Here we are at one of China's largest concentration camps in the country. You can see the bars of terror behind me, imprisoning every single minority in China. I just spoke to one of the detainees over there behind me, and she told me of a life of terror and turmoil inside the camp.
I love this
guy. She wishes
to one day. This guy basically goes around. He does China walks, right? He literally just like this. This isn't the bulk of what he does. The bulk of what he does is more in line with what I'm showing here, where he's just walking around and he's showing himself walking around in China and all this. Like, and for God's sakes, like people walk around. Like you want to. I'm misspelling it. Come on, China. Why did I say walk? Come on, walk. Like, people walk around in China, dude. Like, real fucking genocide going on here, right? Like it's amazing how we keep getting told about this genocide, but it's completely invisible. Like, that's the thing that blows me away about it, is that it's fucking invisible. If you want a decision made by democracy of the people, then you are socialist. Capitalism will only lead to a small minority of people ruling over the majority. Yeah, that's right. Because they own the means of production, right? They own the means of production. They own what gets made. They own what gets created in the society. And then they use the wealth that is generated from owning the means of production in order to purchase political power. And so in that way, the democratic system in a capitalist society exists only as an edifice, only as a method to distribute spoils and organize capital, right? And so that means that the democratic structure within a capitalist society is non-responsive to the workers, non-responsive to the massive populace, because they're responding exclusively to their owners who buy them. Parody's exactly what you're talking about with ominous music, weird lighting effects. Yeah, and that guy's really great. He's a really nice guy. The most important thing may be to open your heart to others who disagree. It's why I'm here. What a beautiful sentiment, Kate. It's a beautiful sentiment. And this is why you're always welcome here, Kate. Because you're walking around and you ask pointed questions, and sometimes you ask hard questions that require a lot of digging and all that kind of stuff, but I don't mind, because then you turn around and you're just like, and that's just like some old country twang right there. The most important thing might be to open your heart to others who disagree. That's why I'm here. I'm like, oh. If you want democracy, then you want socialism, because socialism gives power to the people. You guys are saying some beautiful stuff. Oh, back and forth, back and forth. Is she a welder? Come on, Gritting. Dude. Hey, Ward, how you doing, bud? Sneaking in. Oh, you guys have had like a big, long back and forth conversation. That's lovely. Honestly, that's lovely. You guys have that conversation. I don't need to comment on that. How beautiful. Oh, this is where the Canadian commie and me will differ. Let's go, Eric. Because I argue that Trump was an actual fascist who took power and deceived the people to give the oligarch even more power. Trump is actually, like... Trump's not a fascist, though. Like, that's the thing. Like, Trump doesn't have an ideology. Like... You look at the fascists of the past, like your Hitlers and your Mussolinis, and like they were ideologically driven. Like they were writing books and shit, right? Like Trump wasn't a fascist. he was fine with enabling fascists. Don't get me wrong, because he has no ideological position, right? Because his ideological position literally was be the president. That's it. That's all he cared about. He was just like, money, power, put my name on the side of buildings, be the president, I'm big and tough. Like, if you really wanted to encapsulate Trump's ideology, it really goes no further than, that's Trump. Like, that's his whole position. Like, I'm the big boy, I'm the big guy on campus, I'm the tough dude. And if that looks similar to fascism, or if that enables fascism, then so be it, right? I mean, and that's the other side of the coin, right? Like, Isaac, I think you're onto something with that, which is that, like, Obama, Clinton, Bush, like all these guys, in terms of what they did, in terms of the policy that they enacted, are not any better, right? They're not any better. So in my view, if Trump is a fascist, so's Obama, right? Like, Obama did the drone program, right? Like, Obama expanded Bush's wars from 2 wars to 7, right? Like, but I get, like, why people think Trump has that fascist element, and that's because at least Obama understood that you shouldn't fuel or you shouldn't play to the fascists in the society, whereas Trump was fine with it. Like, Trump was fine with it. So in that way, Trump is closer to fascism than Obama was. But in terms of their actual actions, in terms of who they, like, policies and all that kind of stuff, there's not much difference. There's a good deal of continuity. At his time in office, I genuinely believe he wasn't bought and paid for. I also do not agree with the narrative of him being racist. I think he cares for the people. Trump cares about himself. That's all he cares about. Trump cares about himself. Like, and Trump didn't need to be bought and paid for, because Trump is part of, while he's not part of the the political establishment, as like an elected senator or something, he's very much part of the power structure in America, right? Like, he's a land developer, for God's sakes. Yeah. Come on back later, guys. We can have a big conversation about Trump if you like, because we're going to be dealing with him in 2024, right? So we better have a good conversation about Trump right now, so that when he rises to power again. New CTV article: NDP must decide if it wants to be Parliament's conscience or win. Polling analysis. Yeah, I mean, there is something to that. There is something to that. All right, guys. We are at the end of it. My little doggy is looking at me. He wants plays. Can't blame him. I'm very playful. All right, guys. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to make sure you never realize it. Don't let them. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.